Our MC Bigang becomes their new instructor. However, this guy doesn't seem to like him, so he teaches the guy a lesson that he will never forget. He stomped his foot so hard that his eyes almost came out of his eye socket. Bro tries to retaliate, but Bigang with his smooth moves dodges easily and goes around his back, before the guy can react. Bigang punches him in the stomach, and he loses his air to breathe. Of course, our MC is not some asshole who just wants to beat up some kid. Let's go back to the beginning to understand why. 249 years ago, a huge dimensional gate opened in the skies, and from the gate, demons descended. After arriving on the planet, the demons immediately declared that they were invading mankind. The scary demons started cutting down humans, and this marked the beginning of the invasion of demons. Realizing how serious the situation is, the Orthodox Alliance formed the unit known as the Orthodox Heaven Demon Extermination Corps. The created unit declared that they would be wiping out the demons, and 3 days after this, they ran into the demon troops in Manhwa. This doesn't end well for the humans, as they are all wiped out by the far superior demons. A year later, half of the people in the Central Plains were wiped out. Then the Orthodox and unorthodox martial artists worked together to form the last line of resistance in Sichuan. The battle was so intense that it lasted over half a month, but in the end, 90% of the resistance army was wiped out. This then leads to the annihilation of 90% of the Central Plains martial artists. The remaining survivors became slaves to the demon and were dragged to the demon realm. Among those who were dragged to the demon realm is our MC, Bigang. 5 years after this, something shocking happens to our MC. Bigang was unable to use his inner energy from birth, but when the demons worked on him during an excruciating experiment, he was classified as a rare species. After several experiments and brainwashing, Bigang became a part of the demon realm's subjugation army. After this, decades passed with Bigang being active in the demon army. Bigang was involved in the invasion of other dimensions, and he carried out mass unalivings. Bigang continued eliminating people, and 75 years later, he was recognized for his contributions, and he became a commander among the demons. 120 years after he became a commander, he finally found out about what happened to his own dimension. This made Bigang mad, and for 50 years, he searched for ways to manifest a particular technique. 65 years later, Bigang staged a rebellion. He had taken his time to prepare for the rebellion, but a week after the rebellion started, it ultimately failed, with Bigang's soldiers all wiped out. Even Bigang is beaten to a pulp as he stands in front of the Demon King, Tarant. The Demon King mocks Bigang, saying that he is nothing but a disappointment. He tells Bigang that he risked all of his contributions to the army just to stage a weak rebellion. Tarant calls Bigang by his demonic name, Schwitz. But in his weakened state, Bigang screams at the Demon King not to call him such. Tarant continues by telling Bigang that he doesn't understand him. Tarant has spent a lot of time watching humans, and even though they are the weaker species, he admits that they possess a great trait, and that is their obsession with survival, regardless of the situation they have found themselves in. He considers this the only strength that humans have. Tarant then asks Bigang why he decided to suddenly act recklessly after all these years. Bigang replies that he did what he did so he could experience a battle with Tarant. He wanted to know how strong Tarant is so that the next time he fights him, he will be more prepared to defeat him. Tarant is surprised to hear this and admits that Bigang's take is interesting. However, he believes that Bigang is a fool. Tarant lets Bigang know that he has no intentions of sparing him. He assures Bigang that there is no way out for him. On the other hand, Bigang is also confident that he will not die at the hands of Tarant. With the last of his strength, Bigang activates the technique that he has been working on. This immediately opens a purple portal from the skies. The portal covers Bigang, and Tarant immediately recognizes the power that our MC just used. Apparently, Bigang used a technique called time regression. This is the authority of Noizarun, who is an ancient evil god. Tarant finally realizes that Bigang endured defeat and humiliation for the past 200 years, just so he could get a good chance to use the technique. Before the portal takes effect, Bigang arrogantly tells Tarant that he will be more prepared for their next encounter. He assures Tarant that he is going to beat the crap out of him and every single demon in existence. Tarant, who is covered in fire and has a scary appearance, laughs out loud when he hears this. Tarant then tells Bigang that he will be looking forward to their battle together. Tarant admits that Bigang is the only human he has ever acknowledged, and by this, he excitedly waits to see what Bigang will bring to the fight when they meet next. The time regression portal finally activates and Bigang is taken back in time. In the Central Plains, Bigang crashes into a martial arts building. With the technique he used, he has gone back 10 years before the demons arrived. It turns out that the building he crashed into is one of the Orthodox Alliance Martial Arts Academy, which is the Dragon Spring Academy. Days later, the people in the academy believed that lightning was the cause of the damage to the roof. While they were repairing the roof, two guys talked about their disbelief that lightning had destroyed the roof. In addition to this, the lightning only struck the one person they consider to be a loser, and this is our MC. Bigong is a vice instructor in the academy, and he was once an orphan who was brought to the academy by the physician Jin Beck. Everyone knows Bigong as the trash, who can't use his inner energy. He is also the one who was struck by lightning, but the guys are disappointed that he didn't get injured that much. Surprisingly, that day is also considered to be his execution. And by execution, Bigong is competing in a duel. This is a duel for the spear assistant position of the Dragon Spring Academy. People are gathered to watch the fight go down, but clearly, Bigong is the underdog. Bigong is the current spear assistant, but he is being challenged by an opponent who is recommended for the position, and his name is Maeng. Maeng is also known as the Invincible Divine Spear. Since a request came in to verify Bigong's abilities, the duel is a good opportunity to determine who will be the assistant instructor. The two fighters are expected to fight with their honor and in their career as martial artists on the line. Once they are both standing in the ring, Maeng mocks Bigong, telling him that he looks better than he expected. Maeng already thought Bigong was not going to be present for the duel because he had heard that the guy had been struck by lightning. However, Maeng is impressed that Bigong still showed up, and he promises to end things quickly. To make things easier for them both, Maeng even suggests that Bigong surrender. Just then, Bigong opens his mouth to tell Maeng a story. He tells Maeng that in the far future, there was an instructor of a certain martial arts academy who couldn't use inner energy. This wasn't the guy's fault because he was born with that trait, and this caused him to be looked down upon by others. In the end, the incompetent instructor, who was known as the shame of the martial arts academy, suffered a horrible defeat in a public duel. His position as an instructor was stolen, and he was left to do menial jobs. Bigong narrates that the guy suffered so much. Maeng is already confused, and he is forced to ask Bigong what nonsense he is spewing. Unknown to Maeng, Bigong was telling him the story of his former self, who would have suffered defeat in his hands. However, things are different now, and Bigong tells Maeng that he has been waiting for this particular moment for a long time. Maeng gets really mad when he hears this. He had plans to take things lightly with Bigong, but since Bigong can't keep his mouth shut, Maeng plans to teach him a lesson he won't forget. Maeng activates his martial arts skill called the Bull Demon Spear Art. Red aura swirls around him as he points his spear at Bigong. Using the first form of his art known as the Ferocious Bull Charge, Maeng goes after Bigong. However, Maeng is left in shock when he reaches Bigong and feels nothing. Surprisingly, Bigong has moved away before Maeng can get to him, and he is now standing behind him like a cool boss. Bigong reminds Maeng that he needs to land a hit for his technique to work. Maeng gets madder and swings his spear backwards, hoping to catch Bigong, but Bigong swiftly dodges. This shocks Maeng as he cannot comprehend how Bigong is able to dodge his attack. This is something he has trained for decades, and Bigong easily dodges it. Maeng heard that Bigong was weak, but what he is facing is entirely different from what he expected. Bigong adds salt to Maeng's injury when he tells him that his technique is slow, and it is not worth teaching anyone. Maeng still doesn't want to believe that Bigong dodged his attack. He assumes that Bigong only got lucky. Maeng then repositions himself, ready to go after Bigong again. He lifts off the ground so hard that the pressure from his flight cracks the ground where he was standing. Maeng jumps toward Bigong. With rage in his eyes, Maeng activates the Bull Demon Spear Art 4th form, known as Falling Bull Strike. Bigong remains unfazed even with Maeng charging toward him. Bigong then takes the moment to do some cool spear moves, but Maeng mocks him, telling him that there is no way he can block his attack. In a shocking turn of events, Bigong changes his stance and stretches his hand toward Maeng. Just then, Bigong released a fireball from his hand. Maeng is left in shock and fear when he sees this, but there is no way for him to dodge the attack. Maeng is hit with the fireball, throwing him to the ground like trash. Maeng is engulfed in fire while the spectators are left in horror at what they have just witnessed. Maeng screams out, and the overseer of the duel immediately concludes that the duel is over. Bigong is then announced as the winner of the duel. Bigong stands there with all pride as Maeng screams in pain, begging for water to be poured on him. Bigong then recounts how he was captured by the demons and dragged to the demon realm. Bigong survived as much as he could for centuries, and in the process of that, he realized something very important. He learned that his Heat Yang arts, which is a high-level magic, is not quite different from regular martial arts. The physicians soon show up to carry a burnt Maeng from the stage. Bigong still finds a way to mock him as he is being carried away, telling him that they had a good fight. The spectators are left to wonder what type of power Bigong is using. They have never seen a martial arts skill like that in the past. One of them heard Bigong call the technique the Yang Finger Arts. The elders tell Bigong that he won, but they wonder how he is able to use internal energy. Bigong replies to the guys, telling them that it was a stroke of luck. Bigong cooks up a story. He tells the elders that a few days ago, he ate some herb he had never seen before while he was on a walk. Because of this herb, Bigong claims that he can now use internal energy. He is about to continue his story when the elders cut him off. They let him know that they are fully aware that he is spewing nonsense. Bigong is not ready to convince them further, and he tells them that they have a choice to believe him or not. In addition to this, Bigang doesn't think this matters. Bigang points out the fact that he didn't cheat in the duel. It was a fight for the position of teaching spearmanship, but there was nowhere in the rules that stated that they were allowed to fight using only spears. Since this is the case, Bigang doesn't see any reason why he should be interrogated. He won the fight fair and square, and this is just the basic truth. One of the elders is really mad with how Bigang is talking to them, but he is told to calm down by his partner. The official then tells Bigang that he is right, that he won the fight. Just as the man is about to pronounce him the vice instructor, Bigang interrupts him, telling him that he has a request to make. Bigang requests a test to be promoted to an official instructor, leaving everyone stunned. Bigang's duel then makes him popular. He walks through the academy with the students staring at him. As for the Dragon Spring Academy, it is one of the many martial training halls set up by the Orthodox Alliance to prevent hardship in the Jianghu Marim. The purpose of the academy is to raise martial artists who will become pillars of the Orthodox Alliance in the future. The school takes in children between the ages of 15 and 18 from sects and clans that are at least decently big. The school instructors are composed of martial masters from the Orthodox Alliance. They are divided into assistant instructors and senior instructors. There are more assistant instructors than instructors, and this is all in a bid to properly teach the students. Later on, Bigang is about to enter his room when he is stopped by the physician, Jinbek. He asks Bigang how he is able to suddenly use internal energy. He wants to know what Bigang has gone ahead and done. Bigang then replies that it is nothing but a stroke of luck, as he has said before. Jinbek angrily speaks out, telling Bigang that he is saying trash. Jinbek reminds Bigang that he has treated him for a long time. Since the time that Jinbek learned that Bigang couldn't use internal energy, he started doing everything in his power to fix him. But he failed. Jinbek falls to his knees, crying while calling himself a failure. With tears in his eyes, Jinbek says he remembered how others treated Bigang because of his inability to use internal energy. Jinbek starts to apologize, and Bigang smiles when he realizes that the old man hasn't changed at all. Apparently, Jinbek is like a father to Bigang. 542 years ago, before he used the time spell, which is now 15 years ago now, Jinbek was the person who ran into flames to save him as a dying child during a bandit attack. Jinbek was also the one who lost his life while saving others when the demons attacked. However, this time around, Bigang is determined to make sure that Jinbek doesn't die. Bigang walks up to the crying old man and tells him that there is no need for him to blame himself. He also adds that the old man should quit worrying about him. Jinbek's face immediately changes from sad to curious as he hears Bigang say those words. Bigang begs Jinbek to trust him because he is going to resolve all of their problems henceforth. That night, Bigang runs an assessment on himself while he is alone inside his room. He realizes that the time spell he used has caused him to lose 90% of his mana. The best magic he can use right now is the 4th circle, which is quite disappointing because he had previously reached the 8th circle, and this took him centuries to achieve. However, Bigang comes to the realization that he needs to be grateful for the fact that he still has some mana left in him. Bigang then remembers his time in the demon realm yet again while affirming the fact that he is back from hell, called the demon realm. He has been able to reverse the history of Jiangmurim to when the demons had not yet invaded. Even with this, Bigang knows that the demons will still invade 10 years from now. If the demons invade, the realm will fall. But thankfully, Bigang still has his 300 years worth of memories, and he plans to use this to alter everything. Bigang still has information on the demon army, such as the kind of magic they use, the artifacts and weapons that they prepared for the invasion, and most importantly, he knows how to take down the demon king, Terrant. Moments later, Jinbek comes into Bigang's room. He tells Bigang that the Vice Academy Master Cheon Samyung is looking for him. Bigang is surprised that they are looking for him so late in the night, and the fact that Jinbek was the one sent to deliver the message. Jinbek tells Bigang that he doesn't mind, but lets him know that he is worried about him. Jinbek knows that Bigang is being summoned because he requested a promotion. The man urges him to be careful because the test will be hard. In addition, Samyung was the one who recommended Maeng. Since Bigang was able to easily defeat Maeng, Jinbek knows that Samyung probably hates him. Jinbek then asks Bigang why he suddenly decided that he wants to be an official instructor. Bigang replies that this is his first step to fixing the academy. Bigang puts on his clothes and then heads to the office where he has been summoned. Apparently, the Dragon Spring Academy was once a renowned academy. It was considered to be the best out of the top 3 Orthodox martial academies. However, 2 years ago, the academy's master, who is also one of the top 10 martial masters, suddenly disappeared. Because it was hard to replace the man, the academy searched for him for 2 years, but yielded no results. Due to the disappearance of this skilled master, the academy lost its fame. Bigang finally arrives in the room where Samyung and the other officials are waiting for him. Bigang is asked if he is serious about his request for promotion, and Bigang says yes with a big smile on his face. In reality, Bigang hates Samyung because he is the major cause of the academy's decline. Bigang remembers the day of the demon's invasion, Great ruptures opened up from all sides, and monsters that had never been seen before emerged to start eliminating people. There were monsters left and right, with nowhere to escape to. Screams were heard all over, coupled with deaths. This gruesome day marked the beginning of the demon's invasion of the dimension. The young disciples of the Dragon Academy were all wiped out in the most ruthless of ways. That day, Bigang saw Semyoung and Instructor Deung running away from the academy. Apparently, Semyoung hadn't run away, or if he had just reported the situation or even activated the defense system in the academy, it would have prevented many deaths. While standing in that room, Bigang can still remember the screams of the disciples who were unalived that day. Although this has not happened yet since Bigang is now in the past, but Bigang has no intention of forgetting Semyoung's ugly face. Since Bigang is adamant about his promotion, Semyoung lets him know that there is a test that he needs to pass first. Semyoung tells Bigang that he needs to raid the demonic knight stronghold. Bigang is shocked when he hears this, and he is forced to ask again. The demonic stronghold is a bunch of bandits in the mountain close to the academy. Semyoung confirms this, and he tells Bigang that he needs to terminate the bandits. In official terms, the demonic knight stronghold is a large group of bandits located in the old sacred mountain situated not far from the Dragon Spring Academy. Due to reports of frequent damage caused by the bandit group, there is an order to raid the bandits for the sake of the civilians. This is the order given to Bigang by Semyoung, and it is signed in an official scroll. After reading the scroll, Bigang is forced to ask Semyoung why he needs to terminate a bunch of bandits to become an instructor. Semyoung lets Bigang know that the request concerns the most basic requirements to become an instructor, since senior instructors are the main force of the academy. Also sitting in the room is Deung, and he is the blade technique senior instructor. Basically, all the senior instructors in the school are considered martial masters. From Semyoung, who is a master of the lightning blade arts, to Deung, whose arts focus on the tyrannical tiger blade. There is also Yoon Byuk, who specializes in archery technique, and his art is the soul-chasing arrow. Sang Pilji is also an instructor, and his art is the Dark Shadow Divine Sword. All these people have been officially recognized by the Orthodox Alliance because they have accomplished great things, such as eliminating evil demonic martial artist leaders or taking down bandits. After hearing everything that Semyoung has to say, Bigang asks him how long he has to complete his mission. This gets Deung mad as he considers Bigang an arrogant kid, but Semyoung calms his partner down. Semyoung then tells Bigang that he has 2 weeks to complete the mission and even a day's lateness will not be tolerated. Bigang smiles when he hears this. He tells them that he doesn't need 2 weeks because he is going to complete the mission in 3 days. The level of confidence that Bigang has shocks the instructors, especially Deung. After Bigang leaves the room, Deung asks Semyoung if he truly has plans to promote Bigang. However, Semyoung tells Deung that he shouldn't worry himself. He assures Deung that Bigang will not be coming back alive. Deung gets curious when he hears this, and he asks Semyoung what his plans are. Meanwhile, Bigang is already on his way to the mountain. He is using the magic spell Haste to move faster. Bigang is not a fool, as he knows what Semyoung is planning for him. Bigang remembers that it was around this time that the Forest Alliance began to rise in fame. Bigang explains that people do not know much about them just yet. As of the moment, it is not something big. At the same time, Semyoung is explaining his plans to Deung. He tells Deung that the head of the alliance is a peak realm martial master. His name is Master Ah Gugyeom of the demonic knight stronghold. Semyoung says Gugyeom is no ordinary bandit leader, and even the Orthodox know this. In truth, he was a former leader of an unorthodox sect called the Heaven-Destroying Sect. He was betrayed, and people believed that he died in the hands of traitors a few years ago. However, he survived, and he later tracked down those who betrayed him, and he wiped them all out. Because of how cruel his revenge was, the unorthodox Murim put out a bounty for his head. Since then, Gugyeom has been hiding, but he recently came out, and he is in the area. After hearing all of these, Deung is shocked, and he asks Semyoung how he knew about what he just told him, but Semyoung dodges the question, regarding it as unimportant. Deung is still worried that Bigang might make it back alive because he displayed something extraordinary during the duel. Semyoung assures Deung that what Bigang is going to face is not a duel, but a real-life situation, and because of this, Semyoung is confident that Bigang is not coming back. Meanwhile, Bigang has reached the mountains. He admits that Gugyeom is not on his level at the moment, since his fourth circle magic will not be able to defeat him. However, Bigang has something else in store for the problem. He plans to increase his mana before facing Gugyeom. After all, his experience and knowledge are already in the 8th circle. Bigang then uses his search magic to locate something crucial to what he is planning. He makes his way to what seems like a regular cliff, but it is not. The cliff is nothing but a barrier made from mana. Bigang smiles when he realizes that he is in the right place. And no one could have imagined that something of great importance was being hidden right there in the central plains. Bigang steps into the barrier and enters what seems like a cave. Sitting in front of him is a shining object. The object is none other than a special grade mana stone. Apparently, the mana stone was carefully placed there by the demons. Since the demons know that they are going to invade one day with the use of interdimensional travel, they come to the realm and secretly plant equipment they will need in the future. The mana stone is the source of their power, and it also recovers the demon's mana. The stone is basically useless to humans, but thankfully, Bigang is not on a human level again. Bigang touches the stone to absorb the energy from it, and this releases an energy explosion that shoots out of the cave. That night, Guillaume and his men are seen searching the mountain. After searching for some time, one of his men tells him that there is nothing on the mountain, but Guillaume tells him to shut up and search thoroughly. Apparently, because of how skilled and experienced Guillaume is, he was able to feel the energy explosion from when Bigang used the mana stone. Just then, Bigang appears behind him, sitting on a rock unconcerned. Bigang then commends Guillaume's intuition, telling him that he believes in him. Guillaume is disgusted by Bigang's presence and he asks him who he is. Bigang uses the moment to aura farm as he unleashes a magic circle in his hand before telling Guillaume that he is an instructor of the Dragon Spring Academy. Guillaume's subordinates do not believe Bigang, but as they argue among themselves, their boss tells them to shut up. Guillaume then turns his attention to Bigang, asking him if he is the cause of the great energy explosion, and Bigang answers sarcastically. Guillaume gets angry and tries to slash Bigang with his sword, but Bigang easily dodges the attack. Guillaume's attack leaves a red explosion, and he believes that he has landed a hit on Bigang. He boastfully says he is there to terminate, but he is shocked when he hears Bigang's voice behind him. Bigang unleashes a mana and attacks Guillaume with it. Bigang luckily reacts to the strike, but the same cannot be said for Guillaume's boys, as they all lose their heads from the attack. This leaves only Guillaume alive, and he opens his mouth in horror as he watches Bigang decimate his entire team. Without fear in his eyes or voice, Bigang tells Guillaume that he is also in the mountains to kill him, which means their objectives align with each other. The two lunge at each other with Bigang urging Guillaume to avenge his subordinates. Guillaume only gets madder with this, and he asks Bigang who he is. The fight between the two gets more intense as Bigang's purple aura clashes with that of Guillaume's red aura. Several sword clashes and explosions are the highlights of the fight as Bigang reminds Guillaume that he is an instructor at the academy. Guillaume refuses to believe this as he struggles to land a hit on Bigang, but Bigang is too swift. Guillaume soon notices that Bigang is not even struggling against him, and this frustrates him. Guillaume finally loses it, and he taps into his ultimate power. A burst of red aura fills the area, causing a shockwave that even pushes Bigang backwards. The name of Guillaume's ultimate attack is Heaven-Destroying Hegemon Divine Arts. Guillaume then releases all of his core to maximize his power, and his eyes turn bright red. Guillaume tells Bigang that he has made a big mistake by forcing him to use his ultimate skill. He starts explaining the origin of the power. It all started when he was thrown off the cliff by the traitors, and while dreaming of revenge, he collected a bunch of innate core energy. Bigang then shocks the guy by shutting him up, letting him know that no one cares about his story. The insult from this shocks Guillaume. Bigang makes it clear that he doesn't care about the story of some useless villain. Just then, Guillaume notices an ice path that leads straight to his body, keeping him in place. This turns out to be one of Bigang's techniques called the freezing wave. Guillaume is still in shock about this when Bigang gets closer to him and hits him with another technique called astral chain. Two portals open on the sides, and from them emerge chains that tie Guillaume's arms, restricting his movement. He shouts in frustration and tries to break free from the chains, but Bigang tells him not to stress himself. He lets him know that the moment the chains touched him, he had already lost. Apparently, the astral chain sucks away the victim's internal energy. It is basically a spell designed to take down martial artists. Realizing that he has nowhere to go, Guillaume asks Bigang where he learned sorcery of this type. He even asks Bigang if he is from the demonic cult. However, Bigang replies that it is not sorcery but magic. Bigang still insults Guillaume, calling him a bandit idiot for not knowing the difference between magic and sorcery. Frustration and defeat set in, and Guillaume regrets the fact that he is about to die on the mountains. Bigang asks him if he has regrets, and Guillaume reveals that the only regret is the fact that he is not able to get his revenge. He wanted to terminate those who manipulated his subordinates when he was still in the heaven-destroying sect. To get his revenge is why he started working with Semyong. This was also the reason he was on the mountains to recover his power. After saying all of these, Bigang claps for him, not showing any form of sympathy for Guillaume's cause. Bigang laughs at Guillaume but admits that he is determined, and he took his revenge pattern the right way. Guillaume cannot believe that Bigang is mocking him, and he scolds Bigang for this. He tells Bigang that he cannot understand his pain since he grew up so comfortably. Bigang hears this and loses this. He cannot believe that Guillaume just told him that he lived a comfortable life. With his eyes glowing, Bigang draws closer to Guillaume. Guillaume sees this and realizes that he has messed up. The expression of shock on his face says it all as he concludes that Bigang is not an ordinary man. In fact, he believes that something is mentally wrong with Bigang. Just then, Bigang decides that he is going to make Guillaume feel what he felt during his 200 years of suffering. Looking like a scary villain, Bigang places his hand on Guillaume's head so that he can get a glimpse of his suffering. Gugom's consciousness is then transported into the demon realm so he can see what Bigung experienced. The first place he landed was the wastelands. He starts to wonder what is going on or what Bigung has done to him. He is still in the middle of this when a giant and scary monster appears right above him. Fear grips, but just after, he is taken to the battlefield where he sees countless humans slaughtered. As if this is not enough, he finds himself in the room where the demons conducted experiments on humans. By this time, Gugyeom is already losing his mind, and he finally loses it when he is taken to the Demon King's presence. Gugyeom finally returns to his body, but he is not himself again. He screams out in horror at everything he has seen in just a short space of time. Bigung stands tall above him, asking him how he felt about what he saw. Bigung lets him know that this is what he is going to experience in 10 years. Gugyeom immediately grabs Bigung, begging him to kill him because he can't handle it. The feared Gugyeom is so broken that tears run down his eyes like a kid. Bigung understands his pain and suffering and agrees to relieve him of his pain. Bigung raises his sword and cuts off Gugyeom's head without hesitation. Bigung then returns to the academy with Gugyeom's head and his sword. He presents them to Semyoung, who cannot believe his eyes. Bigung tells Semyoung that he knew that Semyoung might not believe him if he brought only his sword, which is why he added his head to the collection. Without hesitation, Bigung tells Semyoung that the discussion on his promotion to a senior instructor should be the next thing. The following morning, Semyoung holds a meeting with other senior instructors. Senior instructor Yo Woojin, who uses the fist technique, cannot believe that Bigung took down Gugyeom. He reminds his colleague that Bigung was the shame of the academy until just a few days ago. Eunbyuk then asks Deyoung if it is true that Bigung raided the demonic night stronghold all by himself. Deyoung confirms this and tells his colleagues that he went to the mountains himself. He says he found the bodies of the bandits exactly where Bigung told him he was going to find them. Deyoung admits that he has no idea how Bigung did it, but he noticed that the other bodies, except Gugyeom's, had their throats sliced with just one attack. This creates more confusion among the group because Bigung is known to be a spear instructor. They wonder if Bigung is hiding his sword techniques too, but they just cannot come to the conclusion that this is possible. When Deyoung realizes that his colleagues won't believe him, he tells them that they are free to go to the mountains and confirm things. Semyoung realizes that things are getting out of hand, and he urges his colleagues to calm down. Even to Semyoung, the entire scenario doesn't make sense because he knew how powerful Gugyeom is. He is fully aware that Gugyeom is a peak realm martial master, and he was able to confirm this by himself when he was relaying a message from the Orthodox Alliance to Gugyeom. With how strong Gugyeom is, Semyoung wonders how Bigung was able to kill him in just one night. Even Semyoung admits that he himself is not capable of such a feat. Thinking about all the factors that might be involved, the thought of Jinbaek helping Bigung crosses his mind, but he quickly kills the thought. With what he knows, Jinbaek is not that skilled. The only conclusion that Semyoung can come to is the fact that he needs to look more into Bigung. Semyoung then asks Deyoung if he can get in touch with the Ghost Shadow Manor. Apparently, the Ghost Shadow Manor is one of the biggest assassin organizations in the martial world. The group is known for doing anything as long as they are paid the right amount. Semyoung then tells Deyoung to put in a request to find out everything that they can about Bigung. Semyoung even wants to know what Bigung does on a daily basis. After this, the discussion of whether they are going to promote Bigung comes up. However, one of them already has a solution to this. He has compiled a shabby list of disciples who are going to be under Bigung's mentorship. They all laugh when they see the list, and they commend their colleague for coming up with such a brilliant idea. They believe that Bigung is going to quit, even before the Ghost Manor is able to do their thing. They are very sure that this is going to be the outcome since Bigung has little experience. When asked what Bigung did when he saw the list, Deyoung says he only smiled. Unknown to the old idiots, everything is going according to Bigung's plan. Bigung regressed to this time and place for a reason. After he learned about Nozerin's power of time regression, Bigung thought to himself what he needed to do to prepare for the demon's invasion. Since the enemy is an army that has already conquered countless dimensions, and he is just one person, there are limits to what he can do. In the end, Bigung came to the conclusion that the best thing he could do was to raise an army. Bigung is not looking to raise weaklings like the ones who died before his regression. However, he has plans to raise a powerful army that has learned all kinds of magic and martial arts. Bigung soon stands in front of the students who have been allocated to him. These are guys who have been marked as troublemakers among the first-year disciples. Bigung believes that the students are talented, but their personalities have been getting in the way. In addition to this, some of them are neglected because they don't come from prestigious families. It is normal for Semyoung and his bunch of clans to think Bigung will not be able to handle them, but they don't know something quite important. There were two heroes who did their best during the demon's invasion. One was a martial master who reached the evolutionary realm in his late 20s. He was the last hope of Murim, who led the alliance against the demons, and he is the Heavenly Sword Alliance leader. The second person was a talented archer who led a squad specialized in assassination and patrolling. By himself, he terminated most demons, and he was the demon-slaying divine archer. Unknown to Samyung and his group, those two overpowered guys are among the students they have assigned to Bigung. With a big smile, Bigung welcomes his students, introducing himself as their instructor. Earlier that day, Gok Bork of the 1st Camellia class, second son of the Dragon Tiger Escort Agency, is seen giving training to another student, Dan Le-young. Dan Le-young is also a first-year student, and he is the eldest son of the One-Star Sword clan. Dan tells Gok to give him a break because he has almost broken all the bones in his body, but Gok is not ready to back off. He screams at Dan, telling him to get up because anyone who sees them will assume he is being bullied. Gok tells Dan that he should be grateful that he is showing a weakling like him his Dragon Tiger Mountain splitting fist arts. Dan tries telling Gok that they only take swordsmanship classes in his clan. Gok laughs when he hears this, and he tells Dan that the skills he learned are useless because he couldn't use them against him. Dan gets mad when he hears this, and he clenches his fist as if he is preparing a big attack. Gok sees this and mocks Dan, telling him to stop clenching his fists. He threatens to beat him up again if he doesn't do as told. Realizing that he has no chance against Gok, Dan unclenches his fist before he gets beaten up again. Just then, one other classmate, Yepen Wookyoung, enters the room and urges Gok to stop forcing Dan to train with him. Yeon Wookyoung is also a first-year student whose art is the destructive sword. He is the second son of the Yeon clan. Surprisingly, Gok listens to Yeon and he backs off, telling Dan that he is lucky. Looking dejected, Dan thanks Yeon for coming to his rescue. They are in the middle of this when one of the teachers enters to tell them that they will not be in the Camellia class anymore. Apparently they are being transferred to a newly created class. The trio is shocked to hear this, but are more shocked when Bigung appears in front of them to introduce himself as their new instructor. The cadets looked at Bigung in a scornful way as they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Gok is the first to talk as he tells Bigung to stop messing around. He can't believe that they have had to move classes on short notice, but they will also be receiving instructions from an incompetent teacher. Gok continues ranting until Bigung speaks up, telling him that his choice of words is quite bad. He reminds Gok that he is an instructor, but Gok doesn't care about this. Gok tells Bigung that he doesn't care about whatever strings he had to pull to become an instructor, but he has no plans to learn under him. Bigung realizes that Gok is not ready to stop talking. Bigung decides to resort to the use of the Academy rules, which are under Article 3, Clause 5. Before Gok knows what is happening, Bigung uses the magic spell, Blink, to reach him. This shocks Gok, and before he can do anything, Bigung steps on his foot, causing him pain. Gok screams out in pain as Bigung does this. Gok goes down on his knees, and Bigung quotes the Academy rules that give instructors the go-ahead to punish students if they show bad behavior. Instead of backing down, Gok clenches his teeth in anger. He pulls together a powerful punch to try and hit Bigung. Gok is so mad that he even pulls out his ultimate skill, the Dragon Tiger Mountain splitting fists, just so he can punish Bigung for embarrassing him. However, Bigung effortlessly dodges all of Gok's punches while reciting the school rules for him. Bigung is too fast for Gok to track, and before the big guy knows what is happening, Bigung throws a punch into his chest. The pressure from the punch changes Gok's entire body system, as he looks like someone who just saw a horror movie. Bigung tells Gok that his martial arts are very weak as he continues raining down punches on the big guy. Gok falls to the ground after a barrage of punches has hit him, but Bigung is not done just yet. He tells Gok to stand up and try to fight him again. Meanwhile, Dan is watching from behind, and he is absolutely blown away. He doesn't believe that Gok, who is ranked as the top among the new students during external arts training, is having his ass handed to him. Dan concludes that it is bad enough for Gok to be losing as if he were a newbie. Not ready to give up, Gok tries to stand up from where he is, but Bigung meets him halfway with his knee. Bigung's knee crashes into Gok's face, unleashing a new form of pain for the guy. The rest of the cadets are horrified by what they are looking at, but none of them can move. And now, Gok is now scared as he has realized that there is nothing he can do to counter Bigung. He crawls backward as Bigung moves closer to him. Bigung says he is not pleased with the way his first class has started, but he doesn't mind punishing his students since it is the role of the instructor. Bigung then prepares to punch Gok in the face. Gok looks at the powerful punch coming at him and he is absolutely terrified. However, Yeon intervenes in the fight and grabs Bigung's hand before he gets to punch Gok. Yeon tells Bigung that he is already too hard on Gok, who is just a cadet. Bigung lets off a weird smile when he realizes that Yeon has finally decided to make a move. The reason why he is excited is the fact that Yeon was the powerful Heavenly Sword Alliance leader before the regression. Before the regression, Yeon was a member of one of the prestigious clans in the Central Plains. From a young age, he was recognized within the clan as a martial arts genius. Even among the new students of the Dragon Spring Academy, Yeon displayed overwhelming skill. His talent was far beyond what the Dragon Academy could even contain. At the mere age of 20, he achieved the feat of becoming the youngest in history to become a supreme peak martial master. He was also ranked among the top 10 martial masters of the Orthodox Alliance. Originally, Yeon was supposed to live a brilliant life, but the demons came. From the early stages of the demon invasion, he participated in more battles than anyone else. But not long after this, his clan became the target of concentrated attacks from the demons, and the clan was wiped out. All members of the clan were wiped out, except for him. After this, Yon didn't collapse into despair or depression like others. Yon picked himself up and traveled across the Central Plains, fighting countless battles against demons. He gathered survivors and formed an allied force that transcended both orthodox and unorthodox sects. Even in such a hopeless situation where everything was against him and his army, he led the remaining martial artists in a desperate final resistance. Bigong still remembered how powerful and glorious Yon was. Yon always charged to the front lines of the battlefield, and whenever he unleashed his dazzling sword energy, even massive demonic beasts that seemed to be the greatest were all taken down in an instant. Without a doubt, Yon was considered the hero and final hope of the Central Plains. However, now, he is just another noble brat who is from a prestigious clan. Bigong pushes his hands off, and Yon admits that what Bigong is doing is quite amusing. When Bigong asks him what he means by this, Yon reveals that he is surprised that an assistant instructor who couldn't use internal energy until recently has suddenly gotten strong. Yon knows that this is unexpected, but he is not thrilled with the fact that Bigong is using his newly acquired power to show off in front of cadets. Yon considers this nothing but pathetic. Even Gok is looking all bloodied and ashamed. Yon then asks Bigong if he suddenly got strong due to one of those so-called fated encounters. Bigong is surprised that Yon can even have an idea of what that means. Yon understands that Yon is curious to know, and he promises to tell him if he obediently follows his training from that moment. Shockingly, Yon says he is not interested. Yon complains that he doesn't know what kind of trick Bigong pulled to change the class rosters, but he plans to submit a formal complaint to the academy. Yon turns around to leave after telling Bigong that he has no interest in learning from someone who is filled with arrogance after hitting a lucky stroke of fortune. As Yon walks away, some of the talented students, including Gok, follow Yon. Just then, Bigong does something interesting. He tells Yon that he is wrong for running his mouth like he is special. In addition to this, Yon is acting almighty, believing that he has nothing to learn from him. Yon then places his hands on Dan's shoulders. He tells Yon that he is going to train Dan, and in just 10 days Dan will be able to defeat Yon. Dan hears this and sweat drips down his face. Yon also hears this and turns back to look at Bigong. He demands that the guy repeat himself, and Bigong doesn't hesitate. He boasts in front of everyone that in just 1 week of training, the weakest among them, Dan, is going to be able to take down Yon in a fight. Dan cannot believe what he is hearing, and before he gets the chance to protest, Bigong covers his mouth. Yon then asks Bigong if he is willing to take responsibility for what he just said, and he says yes. Bigong then makes it a bet. He tells Yon that if Dan is able to defeat him in under just 10 days of his training, Yon will follow his training without objections. However, if Yon wins, he is free to ask him to do anything. Bigong assures Yon that even if he tells him to leave the school, he will. Yon laughs when he hears this, and he tells Bigong that he wants nothing from him. However, he wants Bigong to be prepared for the match, and after saying this, Yon walks away. Bigong finally lets Dan go, and he screams out in horror. Dan is already seeing himself as dead meat, and he asks Bigong why he did what he did. Bigong tells Dan to calm down, and he will explain to him, but Dan is already erratic. He continues complaining and refuses to let Bigong go until Bigong gets mad and slaps him across the face. Dan falls face down, and Bigong tells the rest of the students that class is over for the day. He lets them know that the schedule of the next class will be sent to them individually the next day. The students walk away, wondering just what is happening. Meanwhile, Dan is still on the floor, thinking about what Bigong has gotten him into. Bigong reminds Dan that all he has to do is win. However, Dan recounts how his first public spar went. In his first spar after he enrolled in the school, the first person he went up against was Gok, and he was brutally defeated. After this, Gok tormented him every day. However, this same Gok, who is considered to be a monster, went up against Yon and was utterly defeated. Gok was so badly beaten that he couldn't even land a single hit. Bigong admits the fact that Yon is strong because his martial arts talent alone is truly one of a kind. Since Bigong knows how proficient Yon is, Dan asks Bigong why he still had to set him up. Bigong then tells Dan that he has nothing to worry about. He assures Dan that he is stronger than Yon, but he just doesn't know it yet. Apparently, before the regression, he was the demon-slaying divine archer. Dan still doesn't know why he has to challenge Yon in a spar. Bigong tries explaining to him that it is simple. He has to fight and defeat Yon to help prove his abilities as a teacher. However, Dan is not thrilled with this explanation as he believes that this is Bigong's problem and not his own. Dan doesn't have any idea what he stands to earn from helping Bigong prove that he is not a trash teacher. Bigong then lets him know that he stands to earn a chance to get his revenge. Since Gok has always been beating Dan, Bigong asks Dan how he felt when he was beating him up earlier. He asks Dan if he felt fulfilled or satisfied with this, or if he wanted to get revenge all by himself. Bigong then tells Dan something interesting. Since Gok, whom he considered to be strong, cannot touch a hair on Yon's head, Bigung lets Dan know that he can train him to get stronger than Yon. With this, Dan can finally have what it takes to even bully Gok himself. After hearing all of these, Dan agrees that it will be nice for him to get stronger. However, Dan is not aiming to become stronger because he wants to defeat Gok. What Dan wants is just to get stronger than his current self. Bigung is glad that Dan has come to this resolution. The next day, Bigung puts Dan up for his first training session. Dan has a dummy to spar with while Bigung monitors from the roof. Bigung tells Dan to go after the dummy so he can know his skill level. Bigung urges Dan to see the dummy as Yon so he can be extra motivated. Bigung urges Dan to wield his martial arts to the fullest. Dan does as told, and he starts slashing the dummy repeatedly. Dan does this for some moment, but just when he is about to slow down, Bigung screams at him to keep going. Dan tries to impress Bigung by putting in his best, but he loses his balance and falls to the ground. He coughs out in exhaustion while sweat drips down his face. Bigung then comes over to where he is. He asks him if he knows what his problem is. Dan replies to the question by explaining what he thinks might be wrong with him. He explains that while carrying out basic moves, for some reason, his internal energy keeps dispersing. Initially, Dan thought he had learned his clan's martial arts incorrectly, so he tried to confirm this several times. However, he found out that there were no problems with his basic moves. After this, Dan believes that he has an issue with his Dantian or Meridian points, so he had it checked out not once but several times. However, even this yielded no results. With all of these, Dan has come to the conclusion that he lacks talent. Bigung then tells him that he is wrong. Bigung reveals something that Dan never thought of before. He tells him that his Meridian points spread further than others. Dan is shocked when he hears this, and he asks Bigung to explain further. Bigung repeats that Dan was born with his Meridian points more spread out in his mind than most people. On a regular day, this is considered to be a rare constitution that has more advantages than disadvantages. However, since Dan is still young and he lacks the internal energy, Bigung lets him know that all martial artists must discharge their internal energy created in their Dantians through their Meridian points. However, Dan has wider meridians compared to others and a little amount of internal energy, which is why his internal energy's power doesn't focus properly. In addition to this is why his internal energy keeps dispersing. Dan is shocked to hear this, as this is the first time he has heard something like this. Bigung doesn't blame him because he only heard it by chance before the regression. Staring at Bigung, Dan starts to feel something different in the air. He believes that there is something more to Bigung than he is letting off. Bigung then mentions that he will end the explanation there. Since they now know what the problem is, the next step is to fix it. Dan is even more shocked when he hears that there is a way to fix his problem. Bigung assures him that there is a solution, and in fact, it is a simple one. Bigung says that compared to other people, Dan lacks power because of his wide meridian points, which means he can resolve this by increasing the amount of internal energy that he has. Dan takes his stance again and stares at the dummy more seriously this time around. Bigung tells him that since they can't increase his internal energy in such a short period of time, he will teach him only one method that he can use. Bigung says Dan should keep gathering internal energy, which he will keep right until he starts his basic moves, and once he has gathered enough, he is free to unleash his power. Dan follows every bit of Bigung's instructions, and for the first time, Dan locks in. He dashes toward the dummy, and in a surprising moment, he cuts down the dummy pretty easily. With Bigung's method, Dan is able to display his true power for the first time. Dan cannot believe his eyes as he looks up with excitement. Bigung is also proud that he is able to make progress with Dan. Dan excitedly turns to Bigung, telling him how good he feels. Bigung assures the guy that he saw everything, but urges him to relax before he collapses. Dan laughs when he hears this because this is the first time in his life that he has felt so energetic. He hasn't finished the statement when he collapses to the ground. When Dan finally regains consciousness, he tells Bigung that he suddenly collapsed, but Bigung clearly saw him pass out. Bigung then asks him how he feels, and Dan confesses that he has no strength left in his body. Bigung then tells Dan that what he is feeling is just a minor side effect from him channeling his full power for the first time. Since Dan has never used his meridians too well in the past, his body couldn't adapt in such a short time, which resulted in him passing out. Bigung mentions that Dan has nothing to worry about because the side effects will naturally go away after a few months. Dan hears this and heaves a sigh of relief until he properly processes what Bigung told him. He is shocked to hear that the side effects might last months when he has a duel coming up in a week. When he finally gathers the strength to resume training, Bigung tells Dan that he is suffering from two problems. Bigung explains that whenever Dan unleashes his technique with his stored energy, all the inner energy he has gathered up until that moment will be consumed with just a single strike. Because his body cannot withstand the blowback, Dan faints. Adding to the problem is the fact that Dan's energy core is also too small for him to store energy ahead of time, and he can't even sustain it for long. And if Dan tries to force himself to do that, he wouldn't just collapse, he would risk going into energy deviation, which is totally forbidden. After the explanation, Bigung asks Dan if he understands, and he says yes. However, Dan is worried about the staff that Bigung is holding in his hand. Bigung then continues his explanation. He tells Dan not to mind the small stuff and instead he should think about it. Bigung lets Dan know that he can actually start storing up energy after the duel begins. He asks Dan how long it took him to gather his energy when he took down the dummy, and Dan says 7 minutes. Bigung is not impressed with this because he doesn't see Dan holding out against Yon for 7 minutes. Bigung then reveals that there is only one solution to the problem, and Dan dodges like hell until he has successfully gathered his energy. Dan finally realizes why Bigung has staff with him. Bigung comes after Dan with the aim of hitting, but he manages to dodge the attack. Bigung doesn't stop, and he comes after Dan again. He tells him to forget about the attack and just focus his attention on gathering energy. Bigung makes it hard by using the illusion spell to make himself appear more than once. Dan fails to dodge this time, and he gets smacked in the head. This hurts Dan, but Bigung tells him to stop whining because he didn't even use any inner energy against him. He then urges the boy to stand up so that they can continue training. Dan is beat up, forcing him to talk trash about Bigung's training method. Bigung then gets serious with him. Bigung asks Dan if he thinks he is bullying him. Bigung continues by telling Dan that his problem has already been identified, which means the next step is a solution. Bigung gets brutally honest with Dan when he tells him that he has no chance of touching Yon if he doesn't improve himself within the space of 1 week. Bigung admits that the training is painful and hard, but he considers this the only way Dan is going to have a chance to prove himself to others. Bigung's words are able to reach Dan, and this is enough to motivate him. He gets off the ground, apologizes to Bigung, and tells him to continue the dodge training with him. He assures Bigung that he can endure a whole day of the training if that is what is going to take for him to be better. This is just something that Dan said to Bigung out of excitement, but deep down, he is scared that he doesn't have what it takes. Bigung is happy to see that Dan's motivation has returned. Bigung rearranges his shoulder while telling Dan that he will have to endure the training non-stop for the entire week. Before Dan even knows what is happening, Bigung charges toward him, leaving Dan in tears. A week later, it is time for the duel. Yon and Dan step into the ring to battle while other students and teachers are present to witness it. Yon looks cool and confident, while Dan has bruises all over his body, but he has the aura of a changed man. Most of the students do not believe in Dan. They are confident that Yon is going to blitz him early in the match. Some believe that Dan might hold out because they saw him practicing but getting smacked around by Bigung the entire week. Even Gok is in the stands, and as expected, he doesn't think Dan has a chance. He says Dan should have just stayed quiet in a corner rather than causing them problems. In his thoughts, Gok is mocking Dan for believing Bigung's words. Gok is confident that Yon will trash him really hard. Before the duel begins, Yon tells Bigung that he has changed his mind. Previously, he said he didn't want anything if he won, but now he wants something. Bigung tells him to proceed with his request, and Yon lets Bigung know that he would like him to leave the academy if he wins. As expected, Bigung accepts the deal and also reminds Yon that if he loses, he will have to follow his instructions to the letter. Bigung then tells Yon to focus on Dan and not him. Talking about Dan, he looks totally different from his usual self. Bigung then reads out the rules. He tells them that victory will be determined when one side either forfeits, loses consciousness, or drops their weapon. In addition to this, any lethal or life-threatening strikes are forbidden. Since Bigung is the judge, he tells them that he will be the one to make the final call. Once everyone is in agreement, Bigung starts the match between Dan and Yon. Just as the fight begins, Dan suddenly feels his arm torn off. This shocks him as he doesn't see Yon move from where he is. He then hears Yon telling him to surrender. It turns out that what Dan just felt is Yon's murderous intent and not Dan's actual presence. Dan realizes that Yon could have torn him apart if he really wanted, but the guy wants him to surrender without getting hurt. This gets into Dan's head, and he starts to shake. He doubts himself, wondering what pushed him to take on the strongest guy in his class. To make things worse, Dan realizes that he only has a week of training. Dan looks around and spots Bigung staring at him. With the way Bigung is looking at him, Dan gets the feeling that he is going to get whooped if he loses the fight against Yon. Dan then reminds himself of the real reason he started the fight. He remembers that he wanted to become stronger than he currently is. This was his vow a week ago, and now he is ready to uphold it. Yon notices that Dan is not ready to back down, and he calls him an idiot, telling him that he already gave him a chance to leave without getting hurt, but he didn't take it. Yon then lunges at Dan with a very powerful strike, but to everyone's surprise, and even Yon's, Dan is able to react just in time to block the attack. The pressure from the strike pushes Dan back, and he realizes that things could have gotten worse than he anticipated. The chi he collected prior to the attack almost got dispersed. Not ready to play around with Dan, Yon activates one of his scary techniques, the Berserk Dragon's Rage Torrent. Even Dan sees this and knows that he is in trouble. Yon comes at him with a swing, but he manages to dodge it yet again. Even though he dodged it, Dan can feel just how powerful the chi from the attack is. Yon takes another swing, but Dan dodges yet again. Dan starts getting confident with the belief that he might actually have what it takes to dodge Yon's attack. Everyone watching is shocked at what they are witnessing inside the ring. Even Yon now realizes that Dan's 1 week of training isn't a waste. Yon then uses another technique, the Twin Dragon Fang Severance. This makes Yon's appearance look as if he has become two. He comes at Dan, but to Dan, he just remembers when Bigung used the illusion spell to split himself. He realizes that Bigung has already prepared him for the occasion. Thanks to his training with Bigung, he is able to dodge Yon's attack yet again. He leaps above Yon and lands behind him with sweat dripping all over his body. Yon is not ready to give Dan a break, as he comes after Dan immediately. Dan dodges the attack, but Yon just keeps coming. This scares Dan as he realizes how fast Yon is. He is not only fast, but he is also precise. However, Dan realizes that he is going against one of the best swordsmen in the Central Plains, and he is not supposed to expect any less. Even with this conclusion inside his head, Dan still pushes himself forward, telling himself that he has what it takes to dodge Yon's attacks too. Dan figures out that the sword technique that Yon is currently using to hunt him down is the same one that Bigung has been using against him the entire week during training. Since he is already familiar with every move, every sudden change and pace, Dan continues to dodge. At some point, Yon is forced to back away after failing to register even a single hit. The students refuse to believe their eyes when they see Yon backing away from Dan. Argument ensues among the students as they try to figure out what is currently happening in the duel ring. Some assume that Yon is acting, but others dispute this because the Yon they know will never consent to acting out a duel match. Meanwhile, Yon is at the edge of the ring, trying to figure out what is happening. He grabs his sword tightly again and suddenly tells Dan that he is sorry for calling him an idiot. This shocks Dan, but Yon continues. Yon admits that Dan has learned a lot within the last week. Yon says he doesn't know how Dan figured out the supreme heaven-severing sword, and he starts to prepare another attack. Dan's face lights up in shock when he sees what Yon is doing. Yon spins his sword, and suddenly, a blue wave surrounds him, making him look really dangerous. The new technique Yon just used is the Fierce Dragon Annihilation technique, and he tells Dan that he is going to admit defeat if he manages to dodge this technique too. The wave buildup from the sword technique gets so high that it starts to scare the people who are even watching from the stands. They have never seen a sword technique like that before, leaving them to wonder what sort of strange technique it is. In a surprising and shocking turn of events, everyone watches as Dan walks toward the blue tornado. All of them keep asking themselves where Dan is going, but Dan just continues toward Yon as if he has lost all sense of fear of him. The night before the duel, Dan looks totally battered and weak. Bigung then commends him for his training so far, telling him that he has been dodging so well, which means their mission might actually be possible. Excitedly, Dan asks Bigung if everything he has learned will allow him to dodge all Yon's attacks, but Bigung says no. This shocks Dan, but Bigung explains that Yon is no fool. He explains to him that to that point Yon would be underestimating him, but if he continuously dodges his sword strikes, he will have no choice but to set up countermeasures. Bigung then mentions that Yon would have no choice but to use his greatest technique if Dan manages to make it to the end. Bigung then shows Dan what the technique looks like. He explains that the technique makes it seem like a fierce dragon is materialized, and it is a martial art that creates massive sword chi. Bigung then shocks Dan when he lets him know that he has no chance of dodging the attack. Bigung mentions that it is quite pointless to try to jump or move back in an attempt to dodge the attack. Bigung explains that the attack will just grow instantaneously and swallow the entire stadium. Dan is left stunned after hearing all of these, and he considers the sword technique practically unbeatable. However, Bigung tells him that he is wrong. Bigung confidently says there is nothing unbeatable in the world. He continues by explaining that the technique, which is a storm of chi, might look perfect, but it is not. Generally, the Fierce Dragon Annihilation technique is a martial art designed to annihilate the majority of the enemies who get scared by its incredible force or even try to run away. Bigung lets off a wicked smile when telling Dan that there is only one way out of the situation, and this is if Dan keeps moving forward. And during the fight, this is what Dan does. Even though all odds seemed against him, he stepped into the storm. Even though he got cut a little, he continued moving toward Yon. Bigung had already prepared Dan for every possible outcome. He already told Dan that Yon would immediately react to the fact that his technique has been exposed. However, Bigung lets Dan know that in that position, Yon is vulnerable. He tells Dan to take his moment and use his stored-up anger and land a blow. Dan follows everything Bigung told him, and with this, he hits Yon before he can react, thus destroying his sword. Yon can only watch in surprise as his sword is scattered into pieces right in front of him. Yon is defeated, and after the battle, Bigung supports Dan by holding him. While everyone is cheering for him, Bigung asks him how he feels. While everyone is celebrating, there are some who are really mad, and one of them is Gok. He probably doesn't believe that Dan just won the battle. Bigung asks Dan if he feels excited, and in a moment of joy, Dan says yes. Later on, Bigung enters his classroom to attend to his students. Since they had a deal, Yan and the others who rebelled had no choice but to be in the class and take Bigung as their teacher. While Dan is smiling, Yan is frowning, probably still in disbelief that he lost. Bigung smiles at the class, and with this, he announces the start of their first class. After Bigung has successfully secured his students' trust, an argument broke out between Semyoung and his circle of clowns. Semyoung cannot believe that things have turned out the opposite of how they want them. The whole point of their mission was to make sure that Bigung voluntarily leaves the academy. However, things are not going their way, and the cadets are following him instead. The two notable students who are with him are Dan Yon. Even though they tried to convince them, the two students remained adamant that they wanted to continue studying under Bigung. One of the group members suggests that they switch their classes again, but it seems Yon has threatened to withdraw from the academy if they do this, and this is not something they want since it is going to destroy the academy's reputation. The guys are now regretting their decision to let a genius like Yon learn under Bigung, who is nothing but a rookie. The rest of the team wastes no time pinning the blame on Semyoung. He is the leader of the faction, after all. Semyoung then asks if it is true that Yon lost to Dan. They tell him that Yon conceded defeat, but from reports, it is certain that Yon lost. Semyoung cannot believe that the prodigy from the Yon clan lost to Dan. This only adds to the mystery that surrounds Bigung. Semyoung then comes to the conclusion that they cannot leave Bigung unchecked. Just then, it dawns on him that they actually submitted a request to the Ghost Shadow Manor and they haven't heard from them. Semyoung is mad about not getting a response from the organization, and he angrily calls them a bunch of mercenaries who act high and mighty. Suddenly, Semyoung hears a voice telling him to be careful with his choice of words. Everyone in the room is thrown into panic as they wonder who is talking to them. Semyoung demands to know who is there, but the voice tells him that he is asking a foolish question. Unknown to him, there is a scary ninja behind him. Semyoung cannot believe that even with the level of his experience in the martial arts world, he couldn't sense the presence of the person talking to him. Just then, the ninjas finally reveal their presence, and they turn out to be from the Ghost Shadow Manor. With a commanding tone, the ninja leader, Ghost Shadow 1, demands to know more about the target, Bigung. He is then given a portrait of Bigung to give him an idea of who the target is. After they leave the room, Shadow 1 holds a meeting with his subordinates, Shadow 5 and Shadow 7. They are surprised that Semyoung and his guys are willing to pay a huge sum to conduct an investigation on one of their own. This makes the situation ironic because the academy is always acting all virtuous to outsiders. Shadow 5 then speaks out of turn, saying they are not so different from the corrupt guys because they also scavenge on dirty funds. Shadow 1 gets angry and reminds Shadow 5 of what their mission is. Apparently, they have sworn to do whatever dirty tasks they can until they find a certain someone and serve him. Shadow 5 apologizes for speaking out of turn, and his boss lets it go. He then tells him to focus on the mission. The question to investigate Jin Baek comes up, but Shadow 1 tells his guy to focus on the target, Jin Baek, in the meantime. Shadow 7 asks his boss if he believes the myth that Bigung had a fated encounter, but Shadow 1 tells his subordinates not to believe such a rumor. Shadow 7 finds it hard to let the stuff go. He mentions that Bigung could not use inner energy until recently, but suddenly he became a martial arts master. He believes that there is something hidden behind the scenes. Just then, the thought of Bigung having secret and powerful backers came up. They assume that Semyoung and his circle already know this, which is why they hired them to investigate. Shadow 1 suggests that Bigung might be dangerous than they actually think, and he urges his guys not to allow anyone to catch a trace of them. Shadow 7 boastfully reminds his boss that no matter how strong Bigung is, there's no way he can detect the stealth techniques of the Ghost Shadow Manor. With this confidence in mind, the ninjas begin their task. Later on, Jin Baek and Bigung are seen discussing outside. Jin Baek mentions that Bigung's name is already spreading through the school. Jin Baek is worried about Bigung, telling him that there are people who have started making moves against him. Bigung understands this and tells Jin Baek that jealousy and envy always follow the path heroes walk, so he has nothing to worry about. Jin Baek mentions how glad he is that Bigung actually had a fated encounter because things have changed for him. Jin Baek says things would have been bad if Bigung had lost the duel against Mayang, since Semyoung was trying his best to get rid of him. Upon hearing this, Bigung recounts what happened before the regression. He actually lost the fight against Mang. He was then stripped of his position as assistant instructor and demoted to menial labor. Unable to cope with the shame and embarrassment, Bigung ran away from the academy. Bigung wandered around with no purpose until he ended up becoming an escort warrior in an escort agency. Even though Bigung still lacked the knowledge to use inner energy, he poured his blood and sweat into training his physical techniques and spear fighting. After surviving numerous dangerous escort missions and attacks from bandits, Bigung eventually became a first-ranked escort warrior. Bigung then spends his next 10 years as an escort warrior. He traveled the entirety of the Central Plains, gathering a network of contacts and information in the process. Then one day, Bigung decided to stop at the Dragon Spring Academy for old time's sake, But this day was when the demons decided to attack. Remembering all of these, Bigang angrily picks up a stone and throws it forward. Jinbek is shocked to see this, and he asks him why he suddenly threw a rock. Bigang claims that he saw an ugly frog and just couldn't help it. Jinbek scolds him for trying to harm a harmless frog, but he reminds the old man that he used to catch frogs and feed them to him as medicine when he was younger. With this, Jinbek couldn't defend himself. In a surprising revelation, it turns out that Shadow 7 and Shadow 5 are hiding exactly where Bigang threw the rock. The rock hit Shadow 7 in the face, causing it to swell up. 7 wonders if Bigang actually saw through their stealth, but 5 assures that it was just a stroke of luck. 5 tells 7 not to doubt the Ghost Shadow Manor's cultivation techniques over something that can be considered irrelevant. 7 agrees with 5, and the guy urges him to believe in himself. Since Bigang is already heading back to his quarters, the only thing they can do is to continue to surveil him. While in his quarters, Bigang comes to the conclusion that the first objective is now complete. He starts thinking about bringing another character who seems to be a girl. He wonders if it is the right time to bring her in yet. He is in the middle of this thought when Yon enters the room. Yon is surprised to see Bigang facing the door as if he was already expecting him. Bigang replies that he is aware that Yon would already be restless, so in a way, he was already expecting to see him. Yon can only wonder what sort of arrogant and disgusting expression Bigang has on his face. Bigang then asks Yon why he has come to see him. After some moments of hesitation, Yon finally talks. He mentions his duel with Dan and points out the fact that Dan was able to read all of his moves. Initially, Yon took it as a result of Dan's training, but later realizes that it can't be. He realized that the movements were not just responses to his moves. It was as if Dan knew everything about his movement and the pathways of his technique. Yon then asks Bigang if he was the one who taught Dan everything about his clan's sword technique. Yon is also surprised that an outsider like Bigang knows about the destructive sword techniques that the Yon clan uses. Bigang replies in a sarcastic manner, telling Yon that his clan's technique is powerful and famous. This means anyone could have gotten wind of it, but Yon is too smart to buy this. He tells Bigang that knowledge is not readily available for just anyone to acquire. Yon berates Bigang for taking him for a fool, and Bigang commends him for not falling for his tricks. Bigang lets him know that he would have been disappointed if he did. Bigang then tells Yon to be more honest with himself if he wants to become his disciple. Bigang is aware that Yon is not only curious about how he knows the techniques of his clan. He confidently tells Yon that he is aware that he also wants to know the flaws of the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword technique. The technique was perfected years ago and has been passed down through the clan as a unique swordsmanship. This is why the swordsmanship is currently praised as the greatest sword art in the Zhongyuan. However, Bigang knows that Yon noticed something while wielding the technique as he grew up. Thanks to his wisdom, Yon was able to figure out that the technique is not actually impossible to beat since it has its flaws. Since he is the heir to the clan, he couldn't acknowledge this fact. When Yon hears all of these, he tries to act tough by telling Bigang not to look down on his clan's martial arts. However, Bigang tells him not to deceive himself, and he lets him know that in the near future, everything that seemed like it mattered, like status and the like, will not mean anything. Bigang then urges Yon that the only thing he should be concerned about now is how he is going to get stronger than he currently is. Bigang encourages Yon to push anything that might be a hindrance to the side and focus on getting stronger. After saying this, Bigang tells Yon that he will only discuss more details with him when he is finally ready. For now, Bigang urges him to follow his instincts. Just then, Bigang picks up his wooden pillow, and Yon asks him why he suddenly grabbed it. Bigang just tells the guy not to worry, claiming that it is not something important. Bigang then throws the pillow out of the window, saying there is an annoying frog outside. Later on, the 3 ninjas, using the cover of the dark, are spying on the compound from a distance. They are keeping an eye on Jinbek since he is the closest to Bigang. With the information that they have gathered, Jinbek is a normal medic who worked in Gamsu, but 5 years ago he became a physician in the academy. Jinbek is a capable medic, but there is nothing that shows that he has properly learned martial arts. Aside from this, there is nothing else that they know about the guy. Shadow 1 sees Jinbek as a regular person, but at the same time, he suspects that there is something more to know about him. Just then, Shadow 1 notices Shadow 7's disfigured face, and he asks him about it. Apparently, Bigang has been throwing things at him all day, leaving his face completely swollen. Shadow 1 asks subordinates if they were discovered, but 5 says no. After all, Bigang didn't react toward them. 7. On the other hand, believes that Bigang has discovered them. Shadow 1 angrily berates 7 for doubting his clan's technique, and he attributes everything that has been happening to luck. He urges 7 to endure a bit longer since he has experienced things far worse than this. With tears in his eyes, 7 concurs with his boss's comment. To prevent a repeat of what has been happening, the ninjas move into the garden. 7 threatens to terminate Bigang if something comes flying his way again. His boss assures him that he will be fine, but 7, who has suffered the entire day, remains doubtful. He says Bigung might wake up and just start throwing things again. Suddenly they hear someone coming close to the garden and they quickly hide. It turns out to be Bigung, and just as expected, he does something crazy again. Bigung stands near the garden and says he needs to take a leak. He complains that he must have drunk too much tea. Shadow 7 is already shaking where he is. He doesn't want to believe that he is about to be the recipient of something awful yet again. After all, he is not the only ninja in the garden. Right there in front of them, Bigung starts to take a leak on Shadow 7's head. 7 can no longer take it, and he jumps out of the garden screaming at Bigung to ask him what his problem is. Surprisingly, Bigung wasn't even taking a leak. He had deceived them into believing that he was relieving himself. He was pouring out liquid from a teapot, but 7 had already blown his cover before he realized this. To make things more annoying, Bigung asks 7 if he wants to take a drink with him. This is when 7 confirms that Bigung has known about them all along, but he was messing around with them. Out of anger, Shadow 7 unsheathes his ninja blades and charges at Bigung in an attempt to unalive him. Bigung stands there unfazed and uses barrier magic to block the attack. The barrier breaks Shadow 7's blades and Bigung grabs him by the head. Before 7 can realize what is happening, Bigung smashes him into the ground as if crushing a bug. With an evil smile on his face, Bigung welcomes 7 and his group of Ghost Shadow Manner, implying that he is aware of their existence. Shadow 5 stands up in shock as he sees his subordinate lying on the ground. Bigung angrily tells 7 that this is what he gets for poking his nose into other people's business. As if he hasn't done anything to upset the ninjas, Bigung smiles and calls them his friends. Shadow 5 is absolutely mad, and just as he is about to go after Bigung, Shadow 1 stops him. Shadow 1 himself then appears behind Bigung, offering his greetings to the instructor. Shadow 1 lets Bigung know that he is impressed that he has already discovered them. Bigung smiles and replies that he is the one and only Bigung whom they are searching for. Bigung then concludes that Shadow 1 is the leader of the frogs, and by this he means the weaklings calling themselves ninjas. Bigung then asks Shadow 1 if it is actually wise for him to reveal his identity to a stranger, but Shadow 1 angrily replies that he has no intentions of letting Bigung live. Bigung laughs when he hears this, and he asks 1 if he is not at all curious about how he found out about them. Shadow 1 is not ready to sit down for a conversation. Instead, he wants to start by cutting Bigung up. He charges toward Bigung with his sword, but our MC is unfazed by the impending danger. He arms himself with his mana blade and blocks the incoming attack. This breaks Shadow 1's blade, but he arms himself with another and goes after Bigung again. The fight becomes even more intense, forcing Bigung to admit a bitter truth. Bigung notices that even though Shadow 1 lacks the destructive power that Gugyum possesses, 1 is faster, precise, and swift. In addition to this, all of Shadow 1's attacks are aimed at vital points. Bigung also figures out that the density of energy embedded in Shadow 1's blade is quite high. Bigung knows that there is no way his barrier is going to hold out against Shadow 1's attacks. Bigung is also worried that he can't continue parrying Shadow 1's attacks using the mana blade. Even though Shadow 1 is quite deadly, Bigung is thrilled to be fighting someone quite tough. As the fight continues, Bigung is able to push Shadow 1 back with his mana blade, leaving Shadow 5 shocked. Shadow 1 then speaks out of his mind. He noticed that the techniques that Bigung is using are quite different from the regular martial arts techniques. Shadow 1 doesn't want to believe that Bigung just stumbled upon such an incredible power. He then asks Bigung if he is using demonic arts. Bigung denies this and asks Shadow 1 if he's ever personally witnessed demonic arts. In addition to this, Bigung says it has been decades since the demonic cult fell, so he should forget about the idea of him using demonic arts. However, Bigung admits that the technique is quite different from the regular martial arts techniques. When Shadow 1 hears this, he comes to the conclusion that Bigung is not someone that they can subdue, which means they have no choice but to send him to the afterlife. With this, Shadow 1 activates his ultimate skill, claiming that whatever he does is for the sake of the Shadow Ghost Manor. Shadow 1 disappears from where he is, leaving Bigung shocked. It turns out that Shadow 1 is using the technique called Soul-Destroying Stride. Bigung recognizes it as an elusive movement technique that, after erasing the user's presence, throws the target into a state of total confusion. The technique also relies on speed, and in that moment of confusion, the target gets hit before even realizing it. This happens just as Bigung thought, but Shadow 1 manages to reach him and cuts off his arm using the Ghost Soul Slash. Before Shadow 1 can celebrate that he got the better of Bigung, he realizes that he has been fooled. Apparently, Shadow 1 hit an illusion and not the real Bigung. Before Shadow 1 can react to this mess, Bigung has already gotten the better of him. Bigung lands a powerful punch to Shadow 1's head to send him flying. Shadow 1 hits the wall, removing his mask from his face. Even Shadow 5 is shocked to see his boss getting punched around. While still feeling the pain from the attack, Shadow 1 asks Bigung how he was able to track him. Bigung knows that the ninjas take pride in their stealth skills, but little do they know that he can clearly see them, all thanks to his search magic. The search magic works like a heat-seeking machine, giving Bigung the ability to see anyone, even if they are using stealth, just like the ninjas. Since he has taken down Shadow 1 and shown him that he is not on his level, Bigung suggests that they have a civil conversation, as he had earlier suggested. Shadow 1 has no choice at this point but to hear what Bigung has to say. Bigung then starts to talk about the Ghost Manor, which is formerly known as the Origin Sect. This sect was a mysterious sect like a ghost. They never once appeared in any official events, and it is not clear whether they are orthodox or unorthodox. Their true goals and aims are kept a total secret. They were so well hidden in secret that when the sect was wiped out decades ago, most of the region didn't hear about it. It was only those who were born and raised in the Origin Sect, loyal to the end, who knew the actual truth. It was those who survived the attack that emerged under a new name, the Ghost Shadow Manor. The ninjas of the Ghost Shadow Manor now go around the region, gathering information, and in the end, they turned out to be a secret organization that carries out dirty tasks and dangerous assignments. However, all of these are for the sole purpose of one thing, and this is the restoration of the Origin Sect. Basically, this is their primary mission and what they care about. Shadow 1 is absolutely shocked as he hears Bigung reveal everything that makes up their organization. He doesn't want to believe that someone who is an outsider knows about the organization's history. There has never been a time in history when the information about the Origin Sect has been leaked. Bigung then goes straight to the point. He tells Shadow 1 that he has 2 missions for him. He tells Shadow 1 that if he completes the 2 missions, he will give him information on that thing that he has been searching for. Shadow 1 clenches his fist in frustration as he reveals that he has been searching for clues for 20 years but has found none. He then screams at Bigung, asking him if he knows what the organization is searching for. With a calm voice, Bigung replies that the organization is searching for the blood of the Origin Sect. Bigung then specifies that they are looking for a unique bloodline that can fully inherit the sect's martial arts. These sets of people always have a distinctive birthmark on their left wrist. Shadow 1 calms down when he realizes that Bigung knows what he is talking about and not just spewing nonsense. This is the core of the sect's restoration and the very reason they have been wandering for so long. Shadow 1 is surprised that Bigung knows this because even within the Ghost Shadow Manor, only a select few should be aware of this secret. Shadow 1 asks Bigung how he knows, but he refuses to answer, telling him that he will only answer once he has accepted his request. Bigung tells Shadow 1 that he is also free not to accept and he can continue wasting his life tailing people. Realizing this fact, Shadow 1 stands on his feet, grabs his sword, and politely accepts the mission. However, Shadow 1 promises to fight Bigung with everything he has if he later finds out that he is deceiving them. Bigung doesn't worry himself about this, but he is glad that Shadow 1 has accepted his request, and he proceeds to give him his first mission. Elsewhere, a deadly assassin lady is seen taking out a bunch of thugs. She single-handedly wipes them out but leaves their vice leader for last. The vice leader, Ma Kuo, and his gang are accused of raiding a village and forcefully taking advantage of the women. It was the women who survived the attack that sent the lady assassin to take out Mac. She sits on Mac, restricting him from moving, and the guy wonders how he is not able to move his body or gather his inner energy. In fact, his internal energy is fading away really fast. In a desperate attempt, Mac reminds the assassin that he is the vice leader of the deadly gang. The lady assassin doesn't care about this, and she finishes off the guy by pushing her sword into him. After she is done unaliving the bad guy, she stands near the window, and this is when a messenger bird shows up. The assassin lady has been given her next target, and it turns out to be Bigung. Moving on to Bigung and his students. Bigung is personally monitoring Dan's training. He leads him on how to move and the right position to stay. Bigung notices that Dan is giving him attitude, and just as usual, he prepares to hit him. However, Dan begs him to stop, asking him why he is not beating Yon. Dan points to Yon, who is having his own personal training session. Yon is just standing there without doing anything, and Dan questions this. Bigung reminds Dan that Yon is not on his level, and when he tries to argue, Bigung angrily beats him since this is the only thing he responds to. Bigung walks away but glances at Yon from the corner of his eye. He is impressed that Yon is doing so well on his own. He urges him not to be bound by the original sword techniques of the Supreme Dragon Heaven Severing. He wants Yon to go to the swordsmanship that his senses are guiding him to. Bigung knows that Yon's talent is going to help him reach a higher level. Just then, Dan shows up again. Bigung asks him if he has completed his chi circulation, but Dan says no. He has come to talk to Bigung because he is worried. He doesn't know if he can really circulate his chi if he does as Bigung ordered him to. Bigung then tells Dan that he has no choice. He lets him know that the only way out of his problem is for him to accumulate enough internal energy. Bigung then asks Dan if he is gathering elixirs as an alternative, but he says no. Since this is not the case, Bigung tells him that the only way for him is to keep circulating his chi. Dan then agrees to do what Bigung says, and dejectedly walks away. Bigung understands why Dan is feeling insecure. He knows that Dan will not be proud of how he beat Yon because it was mainly tricks. However, Bigung knows that it is not something that can be dealt with in a hurry. Bigung then meets with Shadow 1 to ask him about the progress of the mission. Shadow 1 reveals that it has been 10 days with no progress. Bigung is worried because this might affect his plan. Just then, Deung shows up. Since Bigung is not in a good mood, he gives Deung a very disgusting look that is hard to miss. Deung questions Bigung on this, and Bigung tells him that he is disturbing him since he is busy with his class. Deung doesn't think Bigung is busy because he's just walking around. Deung wishes he could take on Bigung, but what he saw in the mountains that day let him know that he is no match for Bigung. Deung then tells him to go to the main hall because Semyoung wants to see him. Bigung honors the summons and makes his way to the hall. Semyoung is already waiting for him, and he asks Bigung how he has been faring. With a smile, Bigung mentions that he has been enjoying life with his talented students. Semyoung is not happy with the way things are going for Bigung, but there is nothing he can do about it. Semyoung then tells Bigung about one of the requirements of the academy. Since the academy is under the Orthodox Alliance, Semyoung says the alliance is doubtful of Bigung's proficiency. Apparently, the alliance has taken a keen interest in Bigung. Bigung is surprised that the alliance is after a nobody like him. Just then, a beautiful girl enters the room. It turns out the girl is an inspector sent by the alliance to evaluate Bigung. The girl introduces herself as Mei Solan, but the presence of Mei in the room trips something off in Bigung's head. However, he lies that he was captivated by her beauty. Semyoung then explains that Mei is a rising female master within the Orthodox Alliance. He adds that the lady is incredible and she reached the peak realm at a very young age. Semyoung urges Bigung not to do anything that will destroy his relationship with Mei. Bigung laughs at this and assures Semyoung that he will be a good boy, but something about Mei seems off to Bigung as he stares at her with a suspicious look. In a flashback, we get to see the mission that Bigung gave Shadow 1. He asked him if he knew the soul-taking celestial maiden, who is an assassin, and Shadow 1 said yes. Shadow 1 says the lady is a contract assassin who works by herself with no affiliates or comrades. The soul-taking maiden is known to never miss a target she is being given. Shadow 1 claimed that he had never met her, but her targets were always found with life sucked out of them. In addition to this, it is said that she is quite beautiful. Shadow 1 asks if his mission is to kill the assassin, but Bigung says no. In fact, he wants Shadow 1 to call the assassin to the academy. This shocked Shadow 1, but while he is still processing this, Bigung tells him to cancel his deal with Semyoung and lies that something came up. Shadow 1 does as told and cancels the deal he has with Semyoung. He even promises to pay the commission fee. He then tells Semyoung that he will introduce him to someone who can actually do the job, and this is when he tells Semyoung about the deadly assassin lady. After that, Shadow 1 asks Bigung why he would do something so reckless since the assassin lady is said not to miss her mark. She normally finds a way to terminate her target no matter how strong they are. Shadow 1 says he is worried about Bigung since he needs information from him and it would be bad if he dies. Bigung admits that the deadly assassin lady is quite dangerous, but this is also why he needs her. Apparently, Mei is the deadly lady, and this is why Bigung is acting funny around her. While sleeping, Bigung remembers the fierce battle he had against the Demon King. Bigung activated double casting, Void Cannon, and Judgment Thunder to hit the Demon King, but the Demon King easily tanks the attack, taunting Bigung, asking him if that is all he can do. Bigung was left in absolute shock when he saw this because he cast 8 the class magic one after the other, and the Demon King didn't feel it. The Demon King even taunted him, telling him to fight with everything he has since he will be executed if he fails. Bigung screamed at the Demon King, telling him to shut his mouth while hitting him with another powerful spell, Atomic Burst. The Atomic Burst unleashes a massive beam of energy aimed directly at the Demon King's head, but the Demon King just raises his hand to catch the blast mid-air. Bigung is shocked to see the Demon King blocking a 9th Circle Ultimate Destruction spell. The Demon King not only blocked it, but he absorbed it and turned it against Bigung. Bigung realizes that the spell is coming directly for him, and he quickly puts up a shield to protect himself. The counterattack from the Demon King was so powerful that it broke through Bigung's shield, putting him in a very dangerous position. Bigung wakes back into the present, sweating really hard, and he gnashes his teeth in annoyance. Bigung admits that the memory is an eyesore. However, Bigung is proud of his current progress. After the regression, the main thing on his mind was securing Mei. Even though this was very important, he didn't know Mei's whereabouts. Although he is thankful that Semyoung and the Ghost Shadow Manor moved exactly according to plan. Bigung considers Mei very important and vital to his plans because even Yeon and Dan, who are considered the strongest in the future, do not come close to her when it comes to abilities. Bigung heads to the training grounds to check on his students, but he finds them staring at Mei, who is training too. The students have their whole attention on Mei, and Bigung doesn't hesitate to join them as they watch the beautiful maiden practice her swordsmanship skills. Mei moves so elegantly with every step that all she leaves behind is a purple trail while swinging her sword. When she is finally done practicing her swings, she turns around to see Bigung and his students staring at her like $1 million watch. Mei offers her greetings to the instructor, and she tells him that she was only swinging her sword for morning training. She asks if she didn't disturb anyone, and Bigong assures her that she didn't. In fact, he commends her excellent swordsmanship skills. Mei then tells Bigong that she has intentions to speak to him. Bigong and the students are so stunned by Mei's voice, leaving them to wonder who exactly she is talking to. Bigong is forced to ask if she is talking to him, and she says yes. She tells Bigong that she would like them to go on a short walk. Bigong has some idea of what the lady wants to talk about, and he agrees to walk with her. Bigong commends Mei, telling her that her swordsmanship skills are remarkable, which is a testament to the fact that she is a member of the Orthodox Alliance. Mei takes the compliment with humility, telling Bigong that there are loads of martial masters who are stronger than her. Mei then returns the favor, complimenting Bigong for being an impressive instructor. Bigong is confused as he doesn't understand what Mei meant by this. Mei then reveals that she heard about Bigong's victory in the public duel. In addition to this, she learned that Bigong single-handedly defeated the infamous Green Forest Alliance. With this, Mei believes that Bigong is an even better martial artist than she is. Bigong is impressed that Mei has done her homework before approaching him. Bigong then replies that he was just lucky to have stumbled upon a fateful encounter, which is something he doesn't think is worth bragging about. Mei argues this since she has talked to Bigong's students, and they all have something incredible to say about Bigong. Mei learns that Bigong doesn't discriminate, and his methods are quite effective even though they are harsh. Bigong is surprised that the student said this about him. Just then, Mei talks about Bigong's hand. She notices that the shape of the calluses and muscles on his palm is a result of holding a weapon for at least 10 years without dropping the weapon. Mei can easily sense that Bigong has trained for many years with his palm, tearing and healing over and over again. Mei tells Bigong to at least be proud of himself, not because he had a fateful encounter, but because he is a true martial artist. Bigong stops a second to look at his hands and reel in what Mei is talking about. Just then, Mei moves closer to him, asking him for the details of the fateful encounter he claimed he had. Bigong then tells Mei that he will be honest with her. Bigong tells Mei that his power did not come from a fateful encounter, and it is not something he wanted. Bigong reveals that the reason he was lying about it being a fateful encounter was that he had no other way to explain it. Bigong then turns around, asking Mei if she has heard of the demonic spirit cult. The moment Mei hears this name from Bigong, she grabs him, demanding to know how he knew the name. Bigong is proud of himself because he has successfully hooked Mei to his bait. Apparently, decades before the demon invasion, there was a divine cult that existed, and they were known as the demonic cult. They were a massive group, and they had a leader called Heavenly Demon. They also had a philosophy to prioritize strength over everything, and because of this, their power expanded rapidly. The Orthodox Alliance soon perceived their growth as a grave threat, and they declared the demonic cult as the public enemy of the Murim. With this, the largest war in the history of the Murim broke out. This was known as the origin of the Great Orthodox Demonic War, in which several martial masters lost their lives. After a long-fought battle, the Orthodox Alliance came out victorious, with the annihilation of the demonic cult. Since then, people believed that the wicked cult had been wiped out. But unknown to people, this is not the truth. It turns out that the remnants of the demonic cult that survived the Great War are still active, but under a new name, the demonic spirit cult. Their activities are so hidden that even the Orthodox Alliance is completely unaware of this. Only those who have had direct contact with the demonic spirit cult are aware of this fact. The moment Mei grabs him, asking him what he knows about the demonic cult, Bigong acts like a fool, asking Mei why she has been aggressive toward him. Bigong begs Mei to let him go, and he promises to tell her everything. Mei immediately lets him go, apologizing for the way she acted, saying she got a little worked up. Bigong then tells Mei that he is fine. However, Bigong asks Mei why she is acting strangely, which can only mean that she knows about the demonic spirit cult. Mei then tells Bigong that the demonic spirit cult is a name that is very important to her. Mei begs Bigong, telling him to explain everything in full detail and with honesty. Bigong smiles evilly, knowing fully well that he has Mei exactly where he wants her. Bigong then turns around, assuring Mei that he is going to tell her everything. Bigong starts narrating the lie that he has cooked up. He tells Mei that it happened after his appointment as assistant instructor. He was sad over the fact that he couldn't use his inner energy. He was taking a stroll late in the night outside the academy when he was suddenly kidnapped. Bigong reveals that when he came to his senses, he saw a terrifying figure standing in front of him. He claimed that the figure told him that he had been chosen to contribute to the revival of their group. Bigong then mentions that the terrifying figure identified himself as the demon scholar. The moment Mei hears this, she gets even more tense as she clenches her fist in anger. Bigong reveals that he was forced to ingest poisons while they operated on his inner organs time and time again. Bigong tells Mei that he later woke up and found himself abandoned in their group's hideout. He had gained power, but instead of inner energy, he gained the ability to use innate core energy. Mei is shocked to hear this. Bigung then explains that his use of the innate core energy is why he doesn't see the power as a blessing, since using innate core energy means he is draining his own life force. Bigung stretches his hand toward Mei, telling her that she is free to check his pulse to see if he is lying or not. Bigung knows that Mei has no choice but to believe everything he has just told her, even though it all sounds weird. Apparently, the innate core energy is made up, but the rest of the information about the demonic spirit cult matches Mei's personal experiences. Bigung adds further, telling Mei that she is free to come check out the hideout where he was abandoned. Bigung says there was no one in the hideout when he woke up, but he believes that there might still be some clues left behind. Bigung claims that the hideout is quite far, so they won't be able to go there that night. He suggests that they meet outside the academy tomorrow night so he can guide her to the hideout. After this, Mei leaves to think about what she just heard. Everything Bigung told her was absolute BS, since he never met anyone from the demonic cult in his past life. His power also has nothing to do with innate core energy because it is pure magic. Everything was a lie he made up just to get to Mei, and he was able to craft these lies because he heard them directly from her. In a flashback, Bigung is strapped to a machine to be experimented upon by the demons. He screams in pain while the demons monitor his condition. The demons were able to discover something interesting about Bigung. They realized that he was exceptional, even though he was considered trash among humans. The demons were able to unlock something great in him, and they kept increasing his magic output. After they are done with their daily experiments, Bigung is returned to the cell where they are keeping other humans like him. Even though Bigung usually had the worst experience when it came to the experiments, he refused to die. It turns out that among those living in the same cell with him is a disabled Mei, who is missing her left arm. After his conversation with Mei, Bigung heads into the woods. Once he realizes that he is alone, he tells his stalker to step out. Apparently, he knows that Shadow 7 has been following him. Bigung clearly knows that the Shadow Company will leave someone behind to keep an eye on him. Shadow 7 almost gets his head crushed by a stone again, but he quickly rushes out from where he is hiding, while seriously wishing that he was not the one left to keep an eye on Bigung. Bigung then throws a scroll to Shadow 7. He tells him that the first page is the location where he wants him to go. However, the second page has specific instructions on what to do when he gets to the highlighted location. Bigung says the cave looks like a rock wall from the outside, but once Shadow 7 enters, Bigung wants him to draw the images on the second page of the scroll all over the walls. Bigung is pretty sure that Shadow 7 won't understand the writing, but he doesn't need to worry about it. He just wants him to draw as many of the images and writings on the wall before dawn. Shadow 7 is surprised when he hears this, and he tries acting stubborn, asking Bigung why he should do what he says. All it took from Bigung was a change of expression, and Shadow 7 quickly changed his mind. He immediately heads over to the location, and Bigung screams at him to get it done by the next morning. Bigung knows that it is going to be a rush job done overnight, but he is sure that it will be enough to fool his target. Bigung plans to make everything work just the way he wants. Meanwhile, Semyoung meets with Mei, asking her about the progress of her investigation. Even though Bigung has told her about the demonic spirit cult, Mei decides to keep it to herself. She tells Semyoung that she has not uncovered anything, and it might take some more time before she gets any real information out of Bigung. Semyoung then urges Mei to be thorough with her investigation since he is pretty sure that Bigung is hiding something. Semyoung claims that Bigung is going to be a threat to the Orthodox Alliance if it turns out that he is part of a notorious group. Mei then tells Semyoung that she doesn't care what group or cult Bigung belongs to. She stabs the table with her knife to show dominance. Mei then asks Semyoung if she has permission to kill Bigung if he tries anything funny. Trembling in fear, Semyoung tells Mei that she is free to do as she sees fit. Mei is already wishing that Bigung is lying to her so she can cause him a world of agony while she bleeds him dry. The following morning, Bigung sits down to meditate and improve his energy core. His energy core has improved slightly, which is thanks to the top-grade monostone that he previously absorbed. However, he is still barely at the level of a 6th circle mage. At his current level, he believes that he should be able to handle at least 1 or 2 peak-level martial masters. Bigung is confident that there is only one person who poses a threat to him within the academy. Bigung is facing the challenge of his lower energy core, and even though it is small, he feels the presence of the energy. Even though there are no issues with the major blood vessels or meridians, there are no martial arts or cultivation techniques that have affected it. This is why he was unable to use magic, but this same problem saved him when he was captured by the demons. Back then, he only knew basic spear techniques and a bit of external martial arts. Instead of the demons killing him, they took him in as an experimental subject, and it was all because of his damned rare constitution. Shadow 7 enters the room while Bigung is busy meditating. He tells Bigung that he has done everything he asked him to, but he is not comfortable with the fact that he is doing loads of weird stuff for Bigung. Bigung stares at Shadow 7, asking him what he made him do, but this causes Shadow 7 to crash out. Before he crashes out and loses his mind, Bigung quickly tells him that he was only playing around. Bigung commends him on a job well done and then tells him to leave. With the cave set up the way he wants, Bigung figures that the next thing is to show Mei. In addition to this, he is going to feed her some really fake intel. Bigung knows that the plan is flawed, but the entrance to the cave is hidden by a barrier which was set up by the demons. However, to the eyes of martial artists, it is only going to look like a really weird type of sorcery that can only be used by a demonic cult. In addition to this, it has information about the demonic spirit cult, which she has not been able to find. Bigung is pretty sure that Mei will fall for it, even if she is suspicious of the entire thing. Moments later, Mei shows up, telling Bigung that she has made up her mind to check out the hideout of the demonic spirit cult. Bigung is glad to hear this, as he has made plans to feed her false intel and push her desire for revenge against the demonic spirit cult. Bigung then tells Mei that they should meet outside the academy that night. Bigung is pretty sure that he can easily manipulate Mei, and this is because of what he knows. In a flashback, Bigung and Mei lost the last human living in their cell. Bigung bangs the door, calling the demons to help him, but the poor dude dies, and the demons only came afterward to drag his body out. Mei believes that they might be the last remaining humans. However, Bigung is hopeful. He suspects that there might be other camps like the ones they are in somewhere else. Mei is sad and depressed, causing her to wish for death. Mei then tells Bigung that this isn't the first time something like this has happened to her. She reveals that the demonic spirit cult kidnapped her, and that was when she gained the energy-absorbing art. It was a side effect of the experiments performed on her by the demonic spirit cult. Mei lets Bigung know that he is the first person she is telling about the experiment, or that she was captured by the demonic spirit cult. Bigung is particularly impressed that Mei's energy-absorbing art works on monsters. Mei mentioned that she wanted to get revenge for what they did to her, but she later gave up. She couldn't find a single trace of the demonic spirit cult for 10 years, and eventually, she realized the truth. She realized that the cult was a vast organization, which is far beyond her reach. Mei also tells Bigung the real reason she joined the war against the demons. It turns out that while everyone was fighting for the survival of humanity, Mei was just in the war to try and get a place to die. However, it was never the intention that she would end up slowly dying in a cell controlled by the demons. Bigung noticed how broken she was, and he told her not to give up. He told her to stop acting like it is all over because no matter how bad it looks, they are alive. Bigung was also stubborn, and he was determined not to die in the hands of the demons while being treated like trash. Bigung tells Mei to try her best to stay alive. He even promised to help Mei to help her track down the demonic spirit cult and get her revenge if by any chance they escaped from the demons. Mei smiles when she hears this, but it is enough to lift her spirit. Now in the present, Bigung is on his way to the cave. He wonders why the memories from years ago started popping into his head, and he believes that this only happened because he met Mei again. However, Bigung doesn't want to succumb to emotions because his priority is to make sure that Mei becomes a vital part of his plan. Bigung knows that Mei doesn't know the true extent of her ability yet. Bigung wants Mei on his side because her ability is one of the key components he needs to take down the Demon King. Meanwhile, Mei has reached their meeting location already. She scouted the area beforehand to make sure that there were no traps or anything suspicious. Since there is nothing suspicious in the area, Mei starts believing Bigung's story that he was kidnapped by the demonic spirit cult. Just then, she hears footsteps behind her and she assumes that it is Bigung. She turns around to see that she is totally wrong. Instead of Bigung, there is a giant and scary dude standing behind her. Mei wakes up from a dream memory of her younger self playing in the snow. She finds herself tied to a pole with several thugs standing in front of her. It turns out that she has been captured by the Black Death sect, and the giant dude in front of her is their leader, Sangtak. The Black Death sect is a notorious sect known for robbery, abduction, and every other vile crime that is known to humanity. In fact, the leader and the vice leader of the sect are brothers. Mei cannot believe that she allowed herself to get captured. Normally, there was no way the sect would have gotten close to her without her realizing it, and she starts wondering if she let her guard down because she heard a clue about the demonic spirit cult. Sangtak talks about Mei going after his brother. He believed that Mei was able to defeat his brother by seducing him, but he later realized how wrong he was. Before they could capture her, the sect had to sacrifice lots of people. Mei taunts Sangtak, telling him that he talks too much. She asks him if he is ready to taste the dust like his brother. Sangtak admits that his initial intentions were to immediately kill Mei once he captured her, but seeing her, he changed his mind. He is glad that he has gotten himself a really beautiful maiden, and he plans to enjoy himself to the brim. Sangtak tells Mei that the first thing he is going to do is cut off her hands, since they are rumored to absorb energy. He will then make all of his boys have a go with her. After this, he threatens to peel off her delicate skin little by little until he finally kills her. Sangtak tells Mei that after doing all of these, he is confident that his brother will finally rest in peace. Mei still takes a dig at Sangtak, telling him that his entire plan is too trash to be called revenge. May is disappointed since she believes that she was on the verge of getting her vengeance against the demonic spirit cult. Instead of getting her revenge, she is about to die at the hands of some thugs. May's only regret is that she didn't get her revenge, and she considers her death a fitting one. The men are already hyped to have a go at May as they tell their leader to slash her and let the fun begin. Suddenly, their happiness turns into shock and despair when Big Ang appears in the room, enraged like a hungry lion. One of the goons tries to hit him, but he uses his speed boost to dodge his attack. He appears behind him and grabs him by the neck while emitting a scary purple aura from his body. Big Ang is so pissed that Sangtak and his boys almost made his efforts for the last 100 years go to waste. Without holding back, Big Ang releases a wave of lightning bolts through his opponent's body. He lights up like a Christmas bulb, leaving everyone who is watching horrified. By the time Big Ang is done with him, all that is left of him is his charred body. The goons are scared because of what they just witnessed, but Sangtak screams at them, telling them to attack Big Ang. This only makes Big Ang even angrier. He uses another spell, Blink, to vanish from their sight. While they are still wondering where he is, he appears behind. Using a spell called Airburst, he blows off a thug's head. Before the others realize what is happening, Big Ang is already after them. He slashes a thug right in the chest, spilling blood everywhere. The rest of the bunch stares at Big Ang as he looks down on them menacingly while wielding his mana blade. They want to run, but Big Ang cuts through them with one slash. In no time, Big Ang turns the entire room into a pool of blood while the thugs scream for help. The ones that are still alive beg Big Ang to spare them. Even May is left in total disbelief as she cannot fathom the idea that she is staring at the same Big Ang that she has been investigating at the academy. While dealing with the thugs, Sangtak tries to take him down from behind. Sangtak believes that he already has Big Ang in his grasp as he tells him to die. Sangtak lands his hit, but just then he realizes that he couldn't cut through. Before his blade could land, Big Ang had used a spell called Stone Skin, which made his skin impenetrable. Sangtak is shocked when he realizes that what he just witnessed is enhanced defensive energy. While he is still trying to wrap his head around this, Big Ang kicks him in the mouth, sending him flying across the room. Sangtak's entire face is mangled, and Big Ang walks up to him. He pins him down and then activates a gravity spell. Looking like a proper maniac, Big Ang jumps up to crush Sangtak's head with enough force and the active gravity spell. Big Ang crushes not only Sangtak's head, but his entire body, leaving only a crater. Just then, he hears May call him. He turns around to see May with a knife. She is maintaining a defensive pose while asking Big Ang who he is. Suddenly, Big Ang switches from his rageful self into a bright person. He smiles, telling May that he is so happy that she is safe. Big Ang claims that he started searching for May after he realized that she was not at their meeting place. Big Ang smiles weirdly while saying his tracking technique is pretty useful. Even with his jokes, May doesn't let her guard down. Big Ang realizes that things are messed up than he thought. Big Ang concludes that his original plan to use pre-regression information has officially failed. This is because he wasn't expecting people to have May as their target. He wonders what it is that he can do since he cannot afford to lose May. It is pretty simple that he needs to get May on his side since he needs her against the Demon King. During his battle against Tarrant, he noticed that his most annoying ability was his nullification barrier, which renders any attack, regardless of attributes or form, totally useless. Big Ang knows that he can only have a chance at being successful if he removes the barrier. And with everything he has gathered so far, the only person who can remove the barrier is none other than May. May has the ability to absorb the inner energy of whoever she touches, and she obviously thinks it is the limit of her power. However, her true power allows her to absorb and even erase any conceptual power. Although she has to reach a high level to do this, Big Ang needs her at that level as soon as possible. Big Ang starts thinking of subduing May, but May screams at him, telling him not to move or else she will kill him. In a flashback, Big Ang is returned to the cell after a painful experiment had him screaming his lungs out. He lies on May's lap while trying to hold on to life. The demons stand by their monitor screens, watching Big Ang. The demons are impressed at how strong Big Ang is mentally since his whole body feels like it's been shredded. However, the demons believe that Big Ang will break at some point since there is no human who can endure the level of mana they have infused in his body. The lead scientist says he is okay with Big Ang dying since they have already gathered all the experimental data that they need on Big Ang. He is also worried that Big Ang might become a threat in the future if allowed to live. May realizes that the different energies injected into Big Ang's body are clashing, which is resulting in them rejecting each other. May wondered if the demons were really planning to kill him. Big Ang subtly called on May, telling her to kill him because he can no longer take the pain. May scolds Big Ang, telling him to stop saying rubbish. She reminds him that they need to stay alive together so that they can get their revenge. Suddenly, May noticed that Big Ang was already losing consciousness, and his body was even breaking down. Just then, May resorts to a desperate move to use her powers on Big Ang. Shortly afterward, Bigang wakes up to realize that his pain is gone, and all of the clashing energies inside him have also vanished. Bigang is totally confused about how this is possible until he hears Mei's voice behind him. Bigang is shocked to see that Mei has absorbed everything and her body is on the verge of breaking down. Bigang screams at her and he tries rushing toward her, but he falls to his knees since he is still weak. Mei tells him to stay still since he was just about to lose his life. Mei explained that after she learned that her abilities work on the demons, she learned that she can actually absorb more things than she thought. She actually managed to absorb the energy inside Bigang, but because the energy is strange to her system, she couldn't erase it. Mei scoffs, saying it might have worked if she had realized it a bit sooner. On the other hand, Bigang was crashing out since he knew that Mei was dying. He asks her why she would risk her life and do such a thing for him. Mei then tells him that she did it because Bigang once told her not to give up. Bigang weeps bitterly, telling Mei that he only said this to keep her alive. With her last strength, Mei tells Bigang to stay alive. She wants him to live on and remember that there was someone named Mei. She also made mention of something before she finally passed on. Now, in the current timeline, Bigang tells Mei not to be nervous, assuring her that he has no intention of harming her. He proves this by dropping his sword, but Mei still doubts his intentions. Mei then asks Bigang how he was able to track her down. She also wants to know if the techniques that Bigang used can be considered martial arts. Mei continues to debunk everything that Bigang has told her, as there is no way she is ready to believe any of it. Mei screams at Bigang, demanding that he reveal his real identity. Bigang calmly replies, telling her that there is no way she is going to believe even if he tells her. Instead of trying to tell her the truth, Bigang tells Mei that he has something for her. Mei demands to know what it is, and Bigang starts by assuring her that he is going to help her take revenge on the demonic spirit cult. The second thing is that he is going to make her martial arts and absorption skills even greater than they currently are. Mei is shocked as Bigang spills everything that he plans to do. Bigang then adds that he is going to be responsible for Mei, protecting her from anything that might want to harm her. However, Bigang has just a single request, and this is for Mei to stay at the academy so she can be by his side. When Mei hears this, she gets mad, demanding to know what Bigang meant by this. She assumes that Bigang wants her to become his mistress. Bigang then tells Mei that he doesn't mean it the way she is putting it. He lets her know that he means it in the literal way. All Bigang wants is for Mei to be safe. Even with this, Mei still doesn't believe Bigang, as she thinks he is just saying trash to save his skin. Mei is worried that Bigang has some ulterior motive, which is why he wants her around. Mei calls Bigang a pervert, telling him to get lost. She lets Bigang know that she would rather die than accept Bigang's proposal. Bigang then mentions her parents, telling her that they would not be happy if she decides not to take the offer. He also calls her by a specific name, Lan Lan, shocking Mei. In a flashback, Mei's parents learn that their daughter was born with a difficult destiny. It was the Taoist who told Mei's parents to give her the name Sholan. He told them that it is a name that holds power, and with this, she will be able to endure in times of trials. When Mei got older, her parents told her this story, but she only made fun of them, telling them that they shouldn't have believed what the Taoist told them. Her parents explained to her that they already had a name ready for her before the Taoist told them the name that they should give her, and the name was Lanlan, which means shining orchid. Mei realized that her parents were worried, but she told them not to, saying she would take care of any problem that came their way. Not long after this, Mei's parents are killed. While crying over her parents' bodies, the leader of the demonic spirit cult appears, telling Mei that she has been chosen to help revive their group. This was where Bigang was able to get the lie he told Mei at the academy. Back in the Black Death sect hideout, Mei becomes more suspicious of Bigang, holding her knife to his face while asking him how he knew about Lanlan, since it is a name known only to her family. Bigang subtly tells Mei that he can't tell her since there is no way she is going to believe him. Bigang pushes her blade away and turns around to leave, telling her that he has told her everything that he can, and she is left to make her choice. However, he lets her know that the promise he made earlier was not an empty one. With this, Bigang leaves the hideout. Mei is left in shock as she tries to understand the great difference between a rageful Bigang and the playful one she saw at the academy. When Bigang returns to the academy, he finds Shadow 7 waiting for him. Shadow is surprised that Bigang was able to slip past him. Shadow is blurting out a bunch of nonsense when Bigang turns around to look at him. The cold and scary stare from Bigang scares Shadow 7 so bad that he runs out of the room, telling Bigang that they will continue their discussion later. Without cleaning up, Bigang falls on his bed in frustration. The next day, Bigang heads to the training ground to check on his students, but his mind is not settled. All he can think of is Mei. Bigang believes that he has messed things up with Mei, and there is no way she is going to believe him. Bigang assumes that Mei has retreated to carry out her own investigation, which is something he would absolutely do. Another part of Bigang tells him to track Mei down since she is absolutely crucial to the plan he's been putting together for hundreds of years. Suddenly, Bigung hears one of the students greeting Mei. Bigung is shocked, and he turns around to confirm. Lo and behold, it is none other than Mei, and she is all smiley and cheerful. Mei walks up to Bigung and she apologizes for interrupting him. She demands that they have a quick discussion, and Bigung quickly agrees. While the students are training and meditating, Bigung and Mei stand in the distance to have their talk. Mei demands Bigung's hand, and after checking it, she concludes that it is true that Bigung cannot use martial arts since there is no trace of inner energy flowing in his meridians. Bigung asks her if she believes him, but this only triggers her anger. She lets Bigung know that there is no way she is going to believe him after all the lies he told her. Mei doesn't appreciate the fact that Bigung has been deceiving her since they met. Bigung adds that he also intentionally asked Mei to investigate his past. Mei realizes that Bigung has been using her from the start. Mei lets Bigung know that she's curious to know how Bigung learned about her family and past, but since she can't beat the information out of Bigung, she is ready to let Bigung deceive her one more time. Bigung then reveals that he had already given up, believing that she had left. Mei mentions that she could have left since it's the rational thing to do, but she wants her revenge against the demony spirit cult so badly that she wants Bigung to keep to his word. However, she promises Bigung that she would move mountains to kill him if it turns out that he is actually lying to her. Bigung smiles, promising Mei that he will make sure she gets the revenge that she desires. Mei then asks Bigung how he knew about her past since she had never told anyone before. It turns out that the name was what Mei told Bigung before she died in the cell after saving his life. Mei urges Bigung to remember the moment of her death, and not only the sadness, but also the little happiness that was wrapped in it. Bigung then tells the current Mei that even if he tells her how he found out, there is no way she's going to believe him. Up next, one of Bigung's students, Nyung Soso, receives a challenge from a prominent student, Mok Danhwa. She claims that Bigung's class is trash and she is going to expose them. Nyung, on the other hand, assures Bigung that she is going to make sure their class is not disgraced. She is determined to make sure that the Mok clan doesn't get their dirty claws into the class. Because of this, Nyung starts training really hard, while Mei supervises her. Mei commends her, telling her that she has a really good stance, but she lets her know that she is straining too much when unleashing her form. She urges her to try to execute it more flexibly. When Mei initially joined the class, Nyung was worried, but after spending time with her, she has grown to realize that she is actually kind and gentle. Because of this, she feels some sort of relief when she is around Mei. Just then, Bigung shows up, claiming that there is a big announcement. He brings out a scroll with SPC written on it and says this is what their class will be called. The students are shocked since the name sounds freaking ridiculous, and they start asking him what sort of name he has gone ahead to choose for them. Just as usual, Bigung is already threatening to beat some manners into them. Bigung then mentions that the acronym stands for Special Purpose Class. He tells them that they are currently in a class with a special mission that is specific to the class only. Dan then asks Bigung what the mission is, and Bigung says it is the defense of the Central Plains Murim. From Nyung's perspective again, she sees Bigung as a cool and respectable instructor who was originally known as a trash instructor. However, everything changed a month ago during a sparring match where he shocked everyone by displaying incredible techniques. Without delay, he passed the exam for promotion to become a full-fledged instructor, and then he became the class's mentor. Even though Bigung is always claiming that he suffered a fateful encounter, the students believe that it is good news for him and for them too. Back to the entirety of the class, Mei walks up to Bigung, telling him that he is spewing nonsense by telling the students that the fate of the Murim depends on them. Bigung argues with Mei, telling her that he is not joking because the fate of the Murim is no joke. Mei then asks Bigung if the stupid-ass name even got approval from the academy, and Bigung mentions that this is the next move, but he is going to need Mei for it. The students notice that the two have been engaging in some really funny disputes among themselves of late. Nyung can see that the two might appear to be blank with each other, but it appears that whatever wall is separating them has come crashing down. Later on, Nyung finds herself in Danhwa's presence again, and she seems to be interested in Yeon. Nyung is confused as to why she is asking for Yeon specifically, but nonetheless, she has no choice. Nyung starts with her usual narration, explaining that he initially refused to transfer to the class. However, after his bet with Bigung, he voluntarily chose to stay in the class. Aside from this, Nyung mentions that she really doesn't have anything to say about Yeon. Nyung then mentions that Yeon has been receiving separate training from the rest of them since the beginning. Danhwa hears this and gets mad, believing that Bigung is intentionally neglecting Yeon, but Nyung quickly clears the air, saying she is getting it all wrong. Deep down, Nyung is wondering why Danhwa is getting mad again. Nyung mentions that she has seen Yeon personally spar with Bigung on several occasions. With what Nyung knows, she tells Danhwa that Yeon is the only one who has gotten the opportunity to cross blades with Bigung. Apparently, most of the time, he is always standing silently in front of the dummies. But even with this, Bigung is always warning them not to disturb him. Even with Nyong's simple explanation, Danhwa concludes that Yeon is getting neglected. Danhwa then asks Nyong if Yeon is fine with his current treatment, and Nyong replies that she is not entirely sure, but it appears that he is not dissatisfied at the same time. After Danhwa is done hearing her daily dose of stories, she and her gang tell Nyong that she can leave, but they let her know that they definitely have their eyes on her. After the gang is gone, Nyong celebrates that she was able to protect SPC, but she later learns that Yeon and Danhwa have been betrothed to each other since childhood. Soon afterward, Ghost 1 heads to Big Ang's roof, and even though he is moving with his concealment skill fully active, Big Ang easily catches onto him, reminding him that his concealment skill is total trash when it comes to him. However, Big Ang asks him why he has come to see him because he wants to believe that it is something quite important. Ghost 1 then throws Big Ang a bottle that contains a weird type of grasshopper. Ghost 1 mentions that he has been working on Big Ang's second request, and even though he could not determine the exact location, he believes that what Big Ang is looking for is somewhere between Hubei and Chongqing, in a remote area with little human presence. Ghost 1 reveals that the entire area has transformed into something really weird and disgusting. Ghost 1 says, even though the task sounded difficult at first, it was easy to locate because what they found was definitely not something that they could just overlook. Ghost 1 almost lost his mind with the type of weird monsters that they found, and he asks Big Ang to tell him about it. Big Ang then replies that he would like to tell him the truth, but even if he did, he would never believe him. Big Ang then puts in simple and straight words, saying that the monsters are a harbinger of disaster. Basically, the invasion of the world by the demon race will happen in 10 years, but after careful investigation, Big Ang realizes that the signs were already there. Around 4 to 5 years prior to the invasion, strange plants and animals that had never been recorded before started showing up in the Central Plains. 2 years before the invasion, mutated beasts started to attack humans, and half a year before the invasion, people began to suffer from mysterious and inexplicable diseases. This was all a plan by the demons, and no one else. The demons were able to easily terraform the environment by scattering mana stones everywhere. This basically turned the battlefield to their advantage, and the name of the tactic was basically known as terraforming. Big Ang only got to know this after years of being with the demons. Big Ang remembers that the very first place where the largest dimensional gate opened was in the Central Plains. Apparently, an entire city was wiped out in a single day during the invasion. After this, the largest dimensional gate that was ever reported emerged in Hubei. Big Ang believes that there will be traces of terraforming in the area already if the gate is present there. This was his hypothesis before, but with the report that Ghost 1 just brought to him, he has managed to confirm it. There is one truth, and this is the fact that the Central Plains is gradually being polluted by the monsters. Big Ang figures out that he has to go there to personally confirm the situation and also try to establish countermeasures. Big Ang commends Ghost 1 for his hard work, and he tells him that the information that he promised him will be delivered via his subordinate in a few days. He urges Ghost 1 to be patient because he needs some time to organize every detail. Just as Big Ang is about to go, Ghost 1 stops him, asking him what his true identity is and what exactly it is that he is hiding. In fact, Ghost 1 wants to know what Big Ang's real goal is. Big Ang then reminds Ghost 1 that he already told him that he is not going to believe him, even if he comes clean with him. Big Ang then tells the dude that in due course he is going to tell him everything in detail, even if he begs him not to. With this new report, Big Ang decides that it is time he starts preparing to leave the Trash Academy. Later on, Deung visits Semyoung in his office to give him detailed reports about the upcoming Heavenly Martial Tournament. Apparently, they have been selecting the best of the best from each class, but Yeon is refusing to go. Deung mentions that he even tried to persuade him personally, but he maintained that it would only hinder his training. Deung tells Semyoung that he has already given up on trying to convince Yeon because he believes that Lee Big-yeom should be able to replace him, even though he is not as talented as Yeon. Semyoung then tells Deung that he has nothing to add to everything he has said, but urges him that everything goes smoothly because the event is the Academy's most important external event. The Heavenly Martial Tournament is an event that is hosted by the Orthodox Alliance, which involves the 3 great schools, the White Martial Academy, Heavenly Academy, and Dragon Spring Academy. The best cadets from each academy usually gather to test their martial skills against one another. The results then influence how each academy is externally evaluated. Apparently, there is someone Semyoung and Deung are supposed to report to concerning the tournament, and this person is the Sword Demon. However, they have chosen to handle things themselves because the Sword Demon has been locked up in his training hall for the past 2 years. The 2 fools are celebrating their win when Big Ang enters the room because he has come to see them. The 2 ask him what he wants, and with a bright smile, Big Ang mentions that he wants him and the students to be the only ones to participate in the tournament. Semyoung angrily smashes his hand on the table, asking Big Ang if he thinks he can get away with such a request, and Big Ang says yes. Big Ang calmly replies that yes, since they are all aiming to be victorious. Samyoung screams at Bigong, believing he is saying trash, while reminding him that the tournament is a really important event where high-ranking martial artists of the Alliance will be present. Samyoung claims that Bigong is not someone who is worthy of being sent to such a prestigious gathering. Since the two are ready to go low, Bigong is planning to go lower. He then asks Dong if he believes in his heart that he truly believes that he is qualified for the role. Dong decides to ask for more explanation, and Bigong doesn't hold back from roasting him, saying he is nothing but an old fossil. Bigong urges Dong to step aside because of the younger generation, but this only makes him angrier. Samyoung notices that Dong is already losing control and he urges him to calm down. Dong's pride is ridiculously shattered, but Samyoung scolds him for falling for Bigong's trap. However, Bigong continues to say all sorts of bad things about him, finally pushing him to the edge. Dong screams at Bigong, telling him to come outside and fight him so he can teach him some manners. Unknown to the old fool, this is exactly what he was waiting for. Bigong knows that Samyoung will be left in shame if he manages to defeat his ex. With this, Bigong will get the chance to take the supervisory role over the Heavenly Martial Tournament, since the tournament is going to be held at the White Academy, which is located in Shanxi. Bigong figures out that it is going to take a month to travel down there. However, a slight detour from the original path will make them pass through the very area where Ghost One reported the discovery of the demonic zone. Bigong knows that it would be better if he went there alone. But this is not his goal. In addition to his series of sinister plans, he is aiming to destroy Samyoung if he tries to come after him after he is done taking care of Dung. Suddenly, Bigong senses an overwhelming and terrifying aura coming close to them. It takes Samyoung and Dung a minute before sensing the scary aura too. Bigong stays cautious until the terrifying person shows up, and it is none other than the Sword Demon. The Sword Demon walks up to Bigong, saying he is actually an interesting fellow and he likes him. Samyoung and Dung, on the other hand, almost faint when they realize who is in front of them. He might be known for many things, but his name is Sang Pilji, and he is the Academy's acting academy master. Still shaking from fear, Samyoung asks Sang what brought him to the office after a long while. Sang is pissed with Samyoung's question, and he asks him if he is trying to tell him that there are certain places that he can't go to in the school. Samyoung quickly changes it into a playful narrative, saying he was only joking. Bigong, on the other hand, is seriously worried because Sang is the strongest person he has met since he regressed. Sang then reveals that he only came outside for fresh air, but he decided to check on some interesting rumors that are flying around in the academy. It turns out that he heard their conversation about the tournament, and he asks Bigong if his aim is to be in charge of the tournament, and he says yes. Bigong adds that he also wants to pick the cadets who will represent them. Sang laughs out loud when he hears this because Bigong is basically saying his personally trained cadets are stronger than the academy's elite. Bigong maintains his straight face when telling Sang that he is serious about his proposal. Sang then tells Bigong that he has only been at the academy for 2 months, and he is already demanding to be the instructor. Since things have become complicated, Sang mentions that they are going to hold a public martial arts competition to decide the representative. Sang tells Bigong that his cadets will have to fight the already selected cadets for the tournament. While saying this, Sang smiles ear to ear, but Bigong is already freaking out. When the entire class heard of this, they freaked out, wondering why they were suddenly being involved in the martial arts tournament. Not only that, they are getting to fight against the academy representatives before they even get a chance for the tournament. Bigong scratches his head in frustration, saying things went out of his control. The class continues to grumble about how he didn't inform them first, but Bigong scolds them for acting out when he is trying to help them out. Mei is also not on board, and she demands that Bigong explain himself because this is not the first time he is going to set something up without informing them first. Mei demands to know why they are suddenly participating in the tournament, and Bigong boasts, saying it is his own way of showing the class how wide the world is beyond what they know. Bigong basically calls the academy total trash, shocking Mei, since he is an instructor at the freaking academy. While everyone is busy freaking out, Yeon just calmly asks Bigong if the match bracket has been decided just yet. Bigong frustratingly says yes, revealing that he just went to get the schedule. Bigong calls out the names, and the first person on the list is Yeom Jaryung. Yeom almost loses the function of his mouth when he hears his freaking name on the damned list. Bigong tells him that he is going to be facing off against Sang Cho-jin from the Ferocious Tiger class, and he is also a first-year student like him. Yeom holds his head in frustration, and when Bigong sees this, he senses that he has some connections with Cho-jin. Yeom mentions that he and Cho-jin used to be in the same class, and even though Yeom challenged him to a fight multiple times, he was always getting beaten up. Bigong teases him, telling him that he should have at least tried to win even if it was just once. After this, Bigong calls the next name, which is Jo Muntak. Jo Muntak will be going up against Danhwa of the Flying Dragon class. The moment Muntak hears this, he bursts into tears, saying he is totally done for. Bigang is confused by his reaction, and he asks him who Danhwa is because he has definitely heard the name before. Muntak mentions that Danhwa is the eldest daughter of the famous Mok clan, and they are a major clan of swordsmen, capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Yon clan. Muntak mentions that Danhwa had even stopped by during the class transfer announcements earlier. This is when it dawns on Bigang that Danhwa is the lady who refused to join the class. Nong then raises her hand, claiming that Danhwa is her friend and she can talk to her to resolve things peacefully. Bigang basically tells Nong that whatever she does is her business, but straight up lets her know that her opponent is someone else. It turns out that Nyong will be going up against Hwang Gi, a second year from the ferocious tiger class. Nong smiles, saying she is well familiar with Hwang Gi because he is the eldest son of a reputable escort agency. In addition, he is related to Deong. Just by hearing this, Bigang automatically classifies the dude as trash. Bigang then proceeds further, saying Yon's opponent is Lee Bigyom, a third year from the Flying Dragon class. The entire class goes silent, shocking Bigang, and he asks them why there is a sudden change in reaction. Dan then mentions that Bigang is ignorant of not knowing Bigyom because he is the top student in the entire third-year class. Bigang then replies that he is aware of this, but he hasn't seen any reason for them to be nervous. The students then mention that Bigyom is also the vice master of the Lotus Sword Hall, and the Sword Hall was founded out of the Yon clan. This basically makes him and Yon rivals. Bigang then asks Yon if he thinks Bigyom is stronger than him, and Yon honestly answers that he has no idea. Bigang then moves past this to the last of the bunch, our favorite Dan. Bigang tells him that his opponent is someone he used to be in the same class, and this is none other than the musclehead, Gok. Dan freaks out when he realizes that his nemesis has turned out to be his opponent. It turns out that Gok actually requested to be pitted against Dan. Dan slaps his head in frustration, knowing fully well that he is done for. Dan and Yom are both scared that they will be humiliated in front of the entire school, but Bigang walks up to them, assuring them that he won't allow them to be disgraced. However, he tells them that there is no gain without pain. He tells them that they have exactly 1 week from the present day to the tournament, which basically means that they need to push themselves beyond the limit. Yom replies that he is not a winning freak, so he doesn't really mind, but Bigang stares at him with so much pressure, asking him if he thinks his opinion is important to him. Not long after this, the students find themselves undergoing severe training, especially the two brats, Yom and Dan. Bigang smiled while telling them that they are going to be undergoing a triple of their usual training schedules for the next week. Nyong feels useless since she is not doing anything, and she walks up to Bigang, asking him if there is anything for her to do. Bigang then tells her that she will be under Mei's guidance for her training. Nyong is glad to hear this, but the same thing cannot be said for Mei. She is frustrated that Bigang is basically deciding everything by himself. Yon, on the other hand, walks away, saying he is going to continue his training the usual way he has always done it. Bigang has no issue with this, since he trusts the dude. Dan then asks Bigang if he's required to go through a special kind of training, but Bigang tells him to continue with his usual breathing cultivation training and nothing else. Dan is frustrated when he hears this, telling Bigang that he should at least teach him something new. Bigang then reminds him that the breathing technique is currently the only way for him to get stronger at the moment. Bigang notices that Dan is worked up, and he believes that this is because his opponent is Gok. Bigang then tells Dan not to be worried about anything, since he defeated Yon himself. Bigang then walks up to Mei, telling her to keep an eye on the students because he needs to step out for a bit. In addition, he tells Mei to make up a stupid excuse if anyone asks about him. Mei cannot believe that she has just found herself with responsibilities, and she wonders if Bigang intentionally brought her close because he wanted to send her on errands. Nong then walks up to Mei, asking her what sort of training she is expected to do. While she is smiling with excitement, Mei is utterly pissed. Later on, Dan is practicing the breathing technique as usual when he suddenly remembers what Bigang told him about not getting worked up because he defeated Yon. It suddenly dawns on Dan that he didn't defeat Yon fair and square because he was only able to do it thanks to the fact that Bigang replicated Yon's sword path for him before their battle. He knows that he is going to be totally trashed if he ever fights Yon again as it stands. Dan admits that his inner energy has improved, but the progress is still painfully slow. However, he is required to fight Gok in just 1 week. To make it worse, he will be doing it in front of people. Dan walks around thinking if he can really pull it off with the single technique that he knows. Just then, he notices some strange noise coming from the training room, and he walks over to check it out. He gets there to find Gok training really hard, and this sends a chill feeling down his spine. Gok suddenly turns around when he notices that someone is there. However, Dan hides behind the door, believing that Gok didn't see him. Unknown to him, Gok is already onto him. Just as he is about to heave a sigh of relief, Gok shows up behind him, scaring him, and he falls on his arse. Gok stares at him intently, claiming that he is there to spy on him while he trains. Dan starts to stutter, asking Gok why he is in the training so late at night. The question sounds very dumb to Gok, who screams at Dan, asking him if he is basically saying he is not entitled to train. Just the sound of Gok's voice sends fear down Dan's body, and he reminds Gok that he never really trained back when they were in the same class. Gok is pissed that Dan could even talk back at him, and he swings his arm toward him, scaring Dan. However, Gok holds back at the last minute from hitting him, promising to beat him senseless during their official match. He tells Dan to make himself scarce because a week from that day, he is going to be suffering a public disgrace in front of everyone. As Gok walks away, Dan cannot believe his eyes because the old Gok would definitely have beaten him to a pulp. Dan is relieved by this. But suddenly, reality dawns on him that he might actually be trash because he was feeling a sense of relief from not getting beaten up by Gok. This sends Dan a reality check, and he decides that he won't continue the way he has started. Later on, Yom is also seen swinging his sword around in an intense training session. He imagines himself fighting Chojin, and he puts his all into the fight, but he gets knocked out in the end. When he woke up, he saw Muntak standing over him to tell him that he had passed out during training. Yom is entirely disappointed in himself, and the fact that they still have 6 long days with the intense training. Muntak then asks after Bigung the dude, who gave them the intense training in the first place but decided to run off. Just as he says this, Bigung shows up, hitting him with a stick. Even though Bigung is strict, he is still impressed with the fact that the two managed to carry out the training repetitions that he gave them. Bigung tells Yom that he is supposed to punish him for losing to Chojin, but he is just going to let it go for once. After he is done talking his trash, Yom asks him where he ran off to because they have been looking for him all day. Bigung scornfully tells the two that he also has things he is doing himself, and they don't expect him to sit around with them. Nonetheless, Bigung believes that it is time they begin their one-on-one lessons in preparation for the martial arts tournament. Yom almost loses his mind when he hears that they still have more training sessions left. Yom complains that they have already trained past midnight thanks to Bigang's ridiculous training schedule, and he is already trying to choke them with another. Bigung smiles, telling them that he still has more training for them because basic training won't help them out against their opponents. However, Yom still thinks it's impossible for them to even get the technique to defeat their opponents in just 1 week. Yom admits that their skills are average, and there is no way their hard work is going to beat the talents of people like Chojin and Danhwa. Yom then sincerely asks Bigung if they even have a chance against their opponents if they undergo the usual training regimen. Bigung finally comes clean, telling them that no matter what they do in a week, their chances of winning are not that high. Yom excitedly used the phrase, "I told you so," and Muntak, on the other hand, wonders what the point of the whole training is if they can't win. Bigung then tells them that if they follow all of his training procedures and schedule, they are not going to lose in the most embarrassing way possible. Muntak gets on his feet, saying Bigung is only talking big, and his words don't really matter. Muntak starts walking away, saying he doesn't care about the tournament again. He smiles in relief, telling Bigung that he is free to expel him from the class or even beat him to a pulp. But this won't change his mind. Bigung's alter ego almost steps out to beat Muntak just like he wanted, but Bigung controls it. Yom, on the other hand, asks Bigung if what he said about not losing in the most embarrassing way is actually possible. Bigung is shocked to hear this coming from Yom because he was already expecting him to quit. Yom admits that he doesn't have it easy, but unlike Muntak, he has a reason to fight. Yom reveals that he actually wants to get revenge against the annoying Chojin. Yom looks absolutely determined when saying this, and Bigung loves it. Bigung then tells him that because of how he just behaved and what he said, he has gotten full marks. Meanwhile, Yon is in training, and as usual, he is alone until Big Yom shows up, asking him why he suddenly cares about the tournament, because he never did before. Yon is shocked to see Big Yom coming to talk to him, and he asks him if he really came to talk to him about why he shouldn't join the tournament. Yon finally offers his pleasantries, but Big Yom tells him to hold because he is wise enough to know that they don't like each other. Big Yom asks Yon why he is suddenly joining the martial tournament. Yon then tells Big Yom that he is getting things wrong because the decision wasn't his, but the decision of his teachers. Big Yom laughs at Yon, saying he is only coming up with excuses, and he screams at him, telling him to speak the truth. Big Yom says that Yon is just pissed and bitter that he took his spot, and he is just trying to get back at him. Yon is disappointed that Big Yom is jumping to conclusions, which is what he is always doing. Yon walks past Big Yom, telling him that he is free to think whatever he wants because he is not in the business of changing his view. Big Yom angrily pulls out his sword and places it on Yon's neck, telling him not to overestimate himself because the only reason he tolerated him so far was because of the main clan, not because he was weaker than him. However, he no longer cares, since Yon has gone ahead to provoke him. Big Yom assures Yon that he is not going to pity him during the martial arts tournament. Yon finally speaks up, asking Big Yom what his true purpose is and why he is training in martial arts at the academy. Big Yom screams like a goat, saying he is doing this to reveal to the world the truth, which is unknown to the common people. And the truth he is talking about is that his clan's swordsmanship is superior to that of Yon's clan. After hearing this, Yon sighs, saying they both agree on the same thing. Big Yom is shocked to hear this, and he is forced to ask Yon what he meant. Yon ignores him and gives him a piece of advice, saying he shouldn't swing a sword that he doesn't intend to cut with because doing such will only destroy his clan's image. Big Yom is pissed at this, but Yon continues to ignore him, telling him that they are going to meet during the tournament. Big Yom angrily swings his sword at the ground to try and scare Yon, but he just ignores him. On the other hand, Dan is thinking about what Gok told him and how he plans to trash him around during the tournament. With what he saw and what Gok said to him, Dan can see that Gok is not joking around with the tournament. Dan is thinking about this when he turns around to see Yom practicing a really painful but what seems like an efficient technique. Dan immediately realizes that something about Yom seems totally different. Dan is about to walk up to him when Muntak stops him from behind, telling him not to disturb Yom. Dan asks Muntak what he is doing staring at Yom, and Muntak mentions that he is simply taking a break in the middle of his special training. Dan is surprised that Muntak is relaxed, and he reminds him that he is going to be in trouble if Bigang sees him. Muntak assures Dan that Bigang won't be coming because he spent all night teaching Yom a weird cultivation method. After this, he vanished from the academy again. Dan is surprised to hear this, and he assumes that Bigang taught both Muntak and Yom the technique, but Muntak quickly excludes himself, saying he didn't stay around for the lesson because he was exhausted. Muntak preferred his sleep, and he went to bed. Dan is pissed when he hears this because he specifically asked Bigang to give him another special training, but the only thing he told him was to continue with his breathing technique. Dan cannot believe that Bigang stayed all night just to teach Yom a new technique while abandoning him. Dan cannot believe that all he is going to do for 6 days is energy circulation and then proceeds to fight the terrifying Gok while everyone else is staring at them. Dan concludes within himself that whatever Bigang has planned for him is nothing but trash. On the other hand, Nyung just finished her training and she thanks Mei for her guidance. Mei commends her for her hard work and she urges her to rest because she must be tired. Mei wonders where Bigang has disappeared for the entire day, leaving her to teach the kids by herself. However, she admits that she is living a good life being a teacher because her former life was tedious. She then decides to check on the other cadets, and this is when she found Dan swinging really hard at a dummy. Mei is shocked to see Dan doing this when he is supposed to be working on energy circulation until the day of the martial duel. Dan then lies, saying Bigang told him the night before to start practicing sword techniques. Mei is shocked to hear this, but she believes him anyway, and she urges him not to overwork himself. After saying this, she leaves Dan to do his thing, and she leaves. Meanwhile, Yan is in the woods, standing in front of a tree, like he is in a trance. At a blinding speed, Yan cuts down the large tree in front of him, and it doesn't even seem like he was doing anything. However, when he opens his eyes, it turns out that everything he did was an imagination of what would have happened if he had made a move. Just then, Bigang shows up, asking Yan if there is any result in his training, and he says no. Yan believes that he still has a long way to go, and Bigang agrees with him. However, Yan knows that at his current stage, there is no way he is losing to an ordinary cadet. Bigang smiles, calling him a cocky brat. Bigang mentions that he would like to see the student who would come out the best at the end of the week. While Muntak is busy sleeping and having fun, Yom is putting his all into the technique that Bigang told him. The night before, Bigang had asked Yom to tell him his story because he found it quite weird that his target for revenge was also his opponent in the duel. Yom then narrates that everything started back when they were cadets in the same group. There was no enmity between them since he was the heir of one of the most prestigious clans in the entire Jianghu. Yom, on the other hand, was from a small, insignificant martial clan, and there was no reason for them to even have a history together. However, Chojin later found out the truth about his no-name martial clan. Chojin made fun of Yom, asking him how someone from an unorthodox clan was able to make it into the Spring Academy. The moment Chojin said this, other students started whispering all around, wondering if Yom was from the underworld. Yom was pissed when he heard this, and he confronted Chojin, telling him that he might have gotten the wrong information. He admits that his father was once an unorthodox martial artist, but he already gave up that path long ago, and with the approval of the Orthodox Alliance, he started a new life. Yom adds that this all happened before he was even born. However, Chojin didn't care, and he even slapped Yom on the face for talking back at him. Chojin calls Yom's father a traitor, who abandoned his own faction and clung to the Orthodox faction and even had the nerve to bear a child. Chojin mentions that everything about Yom disgusts him, and this pisses Yom off. Yom angrily swings his wooden sword at Chojin, but Chojin easily takes him down. After the first time that he lost to him, Yom continued challenging Chojin over and over again, but he always defeated him. Yom tried so much, but not even once was he able to touch even the hair on his head. And then out of nowhere, his group got assigned to the special purpose class. This basically summed up his story, but it doesn't seem enough to Bigung. He thinks it is something minimal because Chojin wasn't petty enough to send assassins after him. Yom is shocked to hear this, believing that Bigung is saying trash, but he gets a knock on the head. Bigung says Yom's entire revenge saga is nothing but childishness. Bigung wanted to leave Yom to train harder in the basics, but Yom screams at Bigung, telling him that what he just heard might sound petty to him, but he has no intentions of forgiving Chojin for what happened. Yom mentions that Chojin insulted him and his parents, and there is no way on earth that he is going to let it go. Yom angrily tells Bigung that he has no idea what his father had to do to leave the unorthodox path. Yom swears and promises to strike Chojin down one day, no matter what it takes him. This finally catches Bigung's attention, and with a scary face, he asks him if he is seriously willing to do anything possible. Bigung admits that Yom's spirit is really great, even though he doesn't see anything to take away from his story. Bigung adds that he likes Yom because he didn't fall into self-pity like Dan. Yom is shocked to hear this, and Bigung finally reveals his intention to help Yom. Bigung conjures a dark energy in his hand and reveals that he intentionally planned to pass it on to him later, but he is now determined to place the dark mana into his energy core. Yom is entirely confused with what he is looking at, and he asks Bigung what it is. Bigung says there is no way he is going to understand, even if he explains it to him. However, he lets him know that the energy is quite different from that of ordinary martial artists. Because of how different it is, it will resist and try to run wild, instead of fusing easily, but Yom's task until the day of the duel is to suppress and harmonize the energy. Bigung assures him that if he is successful in doing this, he is going to be stronger than he currently is. Yom notices the if word that Bigung used, and he asks him what will happen if he fails to suppress the energy. Bigung takes a moment to give him the answer before casually telling him that his head might just swell up and explode. Yom almost loses his mind when he hears this, but Bigung quickly calms him down, saying he is only joking. Bigung tells him that there is no way he is going to recklessly shove something that dangerous into him. Yom is relieved to hear this, but Bigung lets him know that if things go wrong, he will still feel an unimaginable pain. Bigung assures him that the pain will be so much that he is going to wish that he had died instead. With this in mind, Bigung asks him if he still wants the power, and even though Yom was scared to his bones, he accepts it. Yom devoted 18 hours of the day to purely suppressing and absorbing the energy, and in no time, 5 days went by. When Yom first started, he felt like his chest was going to get torn apart because of the unbearable pain that he was feeling. However, he finally managed to settle it down after several repeats of the cultivation method. Suddenly, he realized that the pain had totally subsided, leaving him to wonder if he had managed to succeed in carrying out what was expected of him. However, he doesn't feel like a new, different person. In addition to this, Bigung has been nowhere to be found for days, leaving everyone wondering where he has disappeared to. At some point, it crosses Yom's mind that Bigung might be a big fraud, and he doesn't even know it yet. Unknown to everyone, Bigung was also undergoing his own severe training, and after he was done, he believed that he finally had a bit of preparation in him. The next day turned out to be the D-Day of the Heavenly Martial Tournament public selection duel, and everyone was hyped for it. The students are excited because this is something that has never happened before. Some are even excited that the duel has given them the chance to have a free day from training. In addition, most people don't even believe that Bigung and his students have what it takes to defeat the talented students. However, some are going with the idea that there might be an upset, just like when Dan defeated Yon. In addition to this, Yon has now found himself in the special class. Nonetheless, they believe that Big Yom is way stronger for Yon, and no matter how much he tries, he is just going to lose. In addition to Big Yom, there are also Danhwa and Gok on their sides, which basically make them a cheat code. They are confident that no matter how much the ordinary man works, there is no way he is going to beat talent. Deung also believes this because the candidates he selected are the best in the academy, and it would have been a complete list if Yon were present. Nonetheless, he is confident that his candidates are going to win the duel no matter what. Deung plans to teach Bigung a lesson with the huge defeat that his team is about to suffer. Just as usual, Bigung comes strolling to the arena, telling Deung that he appears to be calm, as if he has won already. Deung is pissed just by staring at Bigung, and he mentions that he heard Bigung has been pushing his students to the limit over the past week. Bigung smiles, saying his students are pretty useless, which is why they need the extra training. Deung then corrects Bigung, telling him that the kids are not useless but pitiful. Bigung is confused by this, and Deung tells him that it is all thanks to him that the kids suffered meaningless hardship throughout the week. In addition to that, he and his students are about to suffer a great humiliation in front of everyone. Bigung smiles. saying he can clearly see that Deung is still pissed about how their last encounter went down. Just then, Bigung notices that Deung is hanging a new sword on his waist, and he calls his attention to this. Deung is proud of the sword, and he mentions that it is a custom-made sword that was given to him to wield alongside his students during the Heavenly Martial Tournament. Bigung looks genuinely impressed by the sword, and Deung continues to glaze at the sword, saying the sword's name is Violet Dawn's Sword. Deung mentions that he got it from the region's most famous forge, and he paid a hefty sum of 200 silver for it. Deung adds that the sword has insurmountable durability because it can cut through stone without bending. To top it all off, the sword is beautiful. Deung calls it the definition of a masterpiece, and Bigung decides to stare at the sword with his all-seeing eyes. Bigung notices that the sword is actually decent, and in addition, it looks like the type of sword that he used during his days as a demon army commander. Bigung concludes that the sword is very similar, but he doesn't want to believe that it is the same sword. Nonetheless, Bigung is prepared to use anything that comes his way. Just then, Bigung tells Deung that they should place a wager on the outcome of the duel. Deung is shocked at the mention of a bet, and Bigung reminds him that they are both rooting for their candidates to win. In addition to that, they have not settled their previous grudge. Bigung then mentions that, depending on the final results, the loser must grant a request from the winner, and refusal will not be allowed. Deung is shocked that Bigung is trying to make a bet on the final results, and he reminds Bigung that he was the one who arranged the matchups for the duel. Bigung tells Deung that he actually remembers and then points out what he said about the candidates deserving to go through proper selection procedures. Deung then reluctantly tells Bigung that he is going to accept his duel. Bigung is glad to hear this because he was expecting Deung to hesitate, but since he has accepted, he can easily figure out that there is something he desperately wants. Deung scoffs, saying he has no intention of revealing what he wants because it would ultimately ruin the fun of it. Deep down, Deung believes that Bigung wants to steal his new sword away from him, which is why he suggested the bet. Deung already plans out what he wants, and this is Bigung resigning from his position as an instructor in the academy. With this, Deung is pretty sure that the annoying special purpose class will be dissolved, and Yan will return to his rightful place. To top it all off, he wants to use the opportunity to teach Bigung a lesson to stop daring him. Since they have both agreed to the bet, Bigung reminds Deung that there is no backing down. Momentarily, Sang shows up on stage, and he calls everyone's attention to why they are gathered. Sang mentions that in the past, representatives were always picked at the discretion of the instructors. But Bigung has challenged that method, and because he found it interesting, he actually accepted the proposal. Due to this change, the original candidates will face off against the challengers, and the winners will advance. Basically, the duel is going to be one-on-one and a total of 5 matches. Victory comes by surrender or by knocking the opponent unconscious. Sang then mentions that any clear attempt to kill means automatic loss to the offender. Once he is done calling out the rules, he declares the match open. The first fighters of the day are Yom and Chojin. Upon getting to the stage, Muntak can see that Yom is already nervous. Chojin wastes no time taunting Yom, saying he has heard about his everyday training. Chojin cannot believe that Yom has been training just so he can lose to him. With a scornful face, Chojin calls Yom a vermin who has refused to know his place. Chojin asks Yom if he remembers how many times he has lost already, and Yom says he is aware of this. Yom replies that Chojin has defeated him 8 times in total, and the moment Yom says this, he makes his move, dashing toward Chojin in anger. He leaps at Chojin, planning to land an aerial hit, but Chojin easily delivers a painful horizontal strike that hits Yom on the face, telling him that he is still trash. Muntak holds his head in frustration, saying nothing has changed, even with all the training that Yom did. Outside the arena, Bigung can also see Deung smiling because he is already feeling confident. Deung cannot believe that Bigung was literally trying to get Yom to defeat Chojin. Deung is confident that the result will remain the same because he has watched the two fight many times in the past. In all of their fights, Yom has lost to Chojin so badly on the previous occasions that they met. In addition, Deung is confident that there is no result that can go against him because the battle bracket is arranged with the most suitable matchups. Deung calls this an experience on his path, while Bigung is nothing but a rookie who needs to learn. Deung is also looking forward to his wager with Bigung because he is about to suffer an inexplicable and humiliating defeat. Deung cannot wait till Bigung suffers the consequences of his actions. Instead of being scared, Bigung suddenly smiled because he knew what was going to happen. By the time Deung turns back his head to watch the fight, he is shocked to see Yom hitting Chojin so hard that he almost breaks in two. With his regular poker face, Bigung lets Deung know that the outcome of the match is already determined, and Deung has no chance whatsoever. Chojin is shocked when it dawns on him that he actually got hit by Yom. Yom smiles while staring at him, and this triggers Chojin, who angrily swings his sword at Yom to knock him to the ground. Chojin is pissed that a lowly person like Yom is laughing at him, and this forces him to start going after Yom really hard. Muntak is excited that Yom managed to land a hit, but to make it worse, he is already getting himself pounded like a drum. Muntak wonders if Yom was only able to land the hit because Chojin let his guard down. Yon agrees with Muntak, saying Chojin was probably careless. However, Yon doesn't believe it is the only factor that they need to consider because he was just as careless in his other matches against Yom too. Yon then tells Muntak that Chojin is born of royalty and would never just allow someone who is from the trash to just hit him carelessly. This is when it finally dawns on Muntak that Yom has changed, and he is not the old dude that he knows again. On the other hand, when talking about the Heavenly Tiger Martial Academy, it was one of the most ancient and prestigious schools in Hunan, boasting over 100 disciples. And the master of this school is Chojin's father. He is the only son of his father, which makes him the region's most renowned prodigy. Chojin is considered the only one who has mastered every technique that the Martial Academy has to provide. In addition, he was raised on countless elixirs and blessed tonics since he was a kid. He is considered a chosen genius among all geniuses. Still enraged that Yom managed to land a hit on him, he activated his technique's first form, the Heavenly Radiance Flurry. Yom manages to keep his ground against this, but Chojin follows through with the Heavenly Cloud Mobility art. By using the 18 rampant steps, he gets behind Yom before he could even react to him. He then uses his technique's sixth form to try and finish Yom off. However, Yom tanks the attack even though his body is reeking with pain. Chojin is pissed that he messed things up in an official match and allowed himself to be hit by such trash. Chojin plans to crush Yom so badly that he won't even get the chance to breathe because this is the only way he can redeem himself. Chojin increases the intensity of his attacks, and he moves to the 9th form. This provides so much attack power that he was sent flying. Yom crashes into the arena grounds, and Chojin smiles, believing that he has finally defeated Yom. Suddenly, he hears Yom asking him if he is done because he didn't even feel anything. Yom tells Chojin that he is not going anywhere because he is not done yet. Chojin almost loses his mind when he sees Yom standing like nothing just hit. Apparently, Chojin just used his best attack against Yom, but he still managed to tank it. While he is trying to piece together what could have happened, Yom dashes toward him at a blinding speed. However, Chojin feels no threat coming from Yom, and he prepares another strike in wait for him. Chojin lands his hit on Yom, throwing him back, but barely 10 seconds later, Yom comes dashing toward him again. Yom swings his sword at Chojin, and luckily for Chojin, he dodges the strike, but the strike leaves the ground shattered. Chojin realizes that Yom's strikes are completely different from before, and he soon figures out that the more Yom gets hit, the more energy he builds up. Yom continues coming at Chojin, and before he knows it, he is already seeing Yom in the form of the devil. This leaves him wondering what Yom did during the past week that he was using in training. The spectators have also noticed that Chojin is getting pushed back, which leaves them totally shocked. Dong starts to panic as he screams at Chojin to get his head back into the game. On the other hand, Bigang remains calm because he knows that Yom has finally adapted to the intensity of the battle. Bigang is actually impressed with how Yom is handling the battle because it appears to be way better than he expected it to be. Bigang narrates that during his time as the Legion commander, when he learned of the existence of regression, he started planning his moves in countless ways to deal with the demons that would appear again after his return. He began planning how to kill the demons in the most effective way possible, and for 65 years, he did his research and designed thousands of anti-demon tactics. However, due to some practical reasons, he had to put some of them aside, and one of them is injecting mana into a martial artist's body to forcibly awaken them. And in turn, they are going to train their bodies to adapt to it. Basically, it is a simplified version of the modification experiments that were carried out on him by the demons. Although the mana is currently diluted, it doesn't change the fact that it is still mana. Mana is an energy source from another realm, and no matter how much it is refined, there will always be side effects. Bigang himself suffered inexplicably in agony for days after reinfusing himself with mana when he first came back from the future. Yom, on the other hand, was able to endure the entire process that even Bigang struggled with, and he succeeded in fusing that power into his middle energy core. The result of what he did speaks volumes since it can be seen in his strength, reflexes, and blood circulation, which have all been enhanced. In addition to everything, his middle energy core has been greatly strengthened, ultimately boosting his stamina, endurance, and recovery. As the fight progresses, Chojin is already getting tired and frustrated, leaving him to wonder just how long Yom is going to continue swinging at him. Enraged, he used his 7th form just so he could get Yom to fall down and give up. Chojin hits Yom so hard, but suddenly Chojin realizes that his arm is being grabbed by Yom while smiling at the same time. Chojin has always won on pure strength, but what is unfolding right in front of him is nothing but a nightmare come to life. With Yom grabbing him, Chojin has no way of escaping, and Yom hits him really hard to send him flying across the arena. Chojin hits the ground so hard that he finds it difficult to stand up. Yom walks over to him, mocking him and urging him to get back on his feet. Chojin angrily calls Yom a coward with no sense of honor because if they were having a real fight with swords, he would have been dead a long time ago. Yom agrees with Chojin but reminds him that they are currently engaging in a duel, and this is none of his business. Chojin watches as Yom raises his sword and is about to strike him on the head. Chojin almost faints when he sees this, and the spectators also watch in horror. However, Sang stops Yom from hitting Chojin on the head, saying the match is already over. Without delaying it, Sang declares Yom the winner of the first match of the duel. Deyoung holds his head in his hands while screaming in shock, but Bigang, on the other hand, smiles evilly, knowing fully well what just happened. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment next part in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.